Chapter 85. Zhang Yan followed the map along the way and found many locations that were marked on the map. However, he was not satisfied with any of them. Either the locations were too obvious, or the demons were too powerful, and he did not dare to enter easily. Finally, he found a suitable cave in an inconspicuous ravine. This place was well hidden, and there were 2 exits in the front and back. There was also an underground river in the cave that led elsewhere. If anything happened, he could swim along the river and leave in time. After tidying up the cave, he estimated the time in his heart. Even though there was no sundial or hourglass, cultivators could sense the specific changes in time from the movement of the qi in their organs. It was about the end of the 2nd day after entering the Devil's Cave. This meant that in order to find this place to stay and cultivate, he had already spent an entire day. Sitting down on a stone platform that had been flattened, Zhang Yan finally had the time to look through the sleeves of the 2 Blood Soul sect disciples. Most of them were things that were commonly used by cultivators, and there was nothing eye-catching. However, there was a small bottle that contained pills that caught his attention. As Zhou Zhongju's disciple, he naturally had some knowledge. He could tell at a glance that this was a vitality essence pill. His expression showed that he had expected this. The Blood Soul sect had indeed secretly refined this kind of pill. This fragrant pill, which would make anyone want to swallow it, was actually refined using the essence of cultivators. Moreover, one could only refine 1 pill for every 5 cultivators killed. These 2 bottles of qi blood essence pills were probably gathered by killing hundreds of cultivators. However, upon closer inspection, he could vaguely see that each pill had a faint trace of blood. Zhang Yan nodded. It seemed that these Devil Sect disciples did not have the guts to hunt down human cultivators. These pills were probably obtained after killing demon cultivators. Under the suppression of the top 10 sects, the 6 demonic sects had kept a low profile for hundreds of years. They did not dare to openly kill people or refine pills. They were even forbidden from cultivating many cruel and evil methods. Therefore, they got along quite well. Whenever the cultivation sects of the Donghua continent were mentioned, they would always refer to them as the 16 sections. In reality, it was not that the 6 demonic sects wanted to turn over a new leaf. It was because many methods required all kinds of strange demons to cultivate. Now, there were not that many demons for them to use. Disciples of the demonic sects often fought to capture demons. Therefore, whenever demons appeared, disciples of the demonic sects would come. They were even more active than the disciples of Xianmen. Therefore, these years, the demonic and celestial sects had maintained a balanced situation. But recently, Zhang Yan had heard a rumor in the sect that the demonic and celestial sects were coming. It was that more and more demons would appear in the Devil's Cave. The other 4 caves that no one knew where would appear one after another. So the sect decided to take the 3 and expand the sect to deal with the demonic and celestial sections. If this was true, then it would completely break the current balance in the Donghua continent. It was only a matter of time before the demonic and celestial sects would start killing each other. Zhang Yan smiled lightly. The demonic and celestial sects were also people's tribulations. The demonic and celestial sects were people's hearts. Wasn't it an opportunity for a cultivator like him? At that time, the ones who would really be worried would probably be the aristocratic families of Xianmen who were trying to maintain the status quo. Putting away the 2 sleeves, he sank his consciousness into his energy reserve. He looked inside at the drop of heavy yin water that was floating quietly. He was filled with emotion. According to the Lan Yun secret manual, the more heavy yin water there was, the more powerful it would be. Therefore, he did not think much of this drop of water. But he did not expect that when it hit the male cultivator of the Xiuhua clan, it would be so powerful. If he had 2 or 3 drops at that time, he might have been able to kill him in one blow. The deeper he went into the Devil's Cave, the colder the underground river became. This was a good place to condense heavy yin water. He believed that if he calmed down and refined it, he would be able to condense 8 to 10 drops of heavy yin water in 2 months. At that time, even if he did not rely on magic treasures, it would be difficult for him to find a match among his peers. Unfortunately, with a great enemy in front of them, Zhang Yan did not think that the people of the Shuahua clan would give him time to cultivate in peace. In order to keep the secret that they could enter the Devil's Cave, they would definitely find a way to eradicate all the disciples of the Qinsang school here. It was even possible that they would send people to guard the exit of the CI on the 15th day. At that time, there would definitely be a conflict. Therefore, Zhang Yan had no choice but to do his best to increase his cultivation as soon as possible. Before cultivating, in order to avoid the Yin Devil's intrusion, he took out a calming pill from his sleeve and swallowed it. Then, he took out the gold element cloud sand. He threw it into the air. When it was about to fall, a stream of spiritual qi leaped out from the top of his head and held the cloud sand, suspending it 1 foot above his head. Zhang Yan sat on the stone platform and released the restraint on his mind, allowing the primordial spirit in his ocean of qi to rush towards the cloud sand. The abundant spiritual qi in the outside world was endless, inciting the spiritual opportunity continuously, causing the 81 spiritual qi to rotate slowly in his chest, continuously producing primordial spirit and sending it to the cloud sand. One cycle after another, the process of refining the cloud sand was not interrupted. If it was on the Spirit Page Island, how could it be done to this extent? It would only take 2 to 3 hours for the primordial spirit to be exhausted. If he wanted to continue, he would need to spend a few more days to breed it again. After a day, the cloud sand above his head gradually emitted a faint golden glow. However, it was flickering, like a weak tinder that could be extinguished at any time. Zhang Yan knew that this was the most crucial moment, so he did not dare to slack off. His spirit became extremely focused, and the golden glow became brighter and brighter. The cloud sand rotated faster and faster in the air, absorbing the primordial spirit faster and faster. In the end, the cloud sand exploded with a pop and became a pile of useless powder, scattering in all directions. The gold element in it was completely absorbed by the primordial spirit. A dazzling golden glow floated in the air, shining like the stars in the night sky. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and slowly exhaled a long breath. Then, he retracted the 81 spiritual qi back into his chest. He extended a finger and placed it in front of him. The glow slowly floated down from the air and stopped on the tip of his finger. Suddenly, a bone-piercing sharp qi came over, and even his divine soul felt a faint prickling pain. He couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy in his eyes. Finally, a seed of profound light was formed. In the future, he just needed to keep using spells to strengthen it. When the light of this seed could shine out of his sea of qi, he would be able to step into the first level of the mystic light realm, initial enlightenment. He took out the star's sword orb and activated the seed of mysterious light to attach itself to it. As soon as he activated it, the sword orb instantly turned into a ray of light that expanded and expanded. When he activated it again, it pushed outwards and enveloped his entire body. Zhang Yan raised his head to take a look, then laughed out loud. Good. With this seed of profound light, I'll be able to form a sword sphere, and even its size and shape can be changed by my will. Furthermore, it can wrap around my corporeal body and fly, and its speed is several times faster than riding on the clouds. With this technique, even if I'm no match for a powerful cultivator, I'll still be able to escape far away. In the past, the method he used to control the sword orb was actually very rough. Most people could only use the true power of the sword orb after reaching the mystic light realm. Now, he could use some of the methods, and he had another life-saving method, which greatly increased his confidence. This seed of profound light only took a day to condense, and it was extremely fast. Now that he was confident, he decided to refine all the cloud sand in one go. After adjusting his breathing, he took out the water-type cloud sand that he got from Guo Songyao and threw it into the air. He used his spirit qi to hold it and refined it again. In the following 2 days, he had condensed the water, wood, and fire elemental profound light seeds one by one. However, on the 3rd day, something strange happened. When he activated the 4 seeds of mystic light together, an earthy yellow seed of mystic light appeared in the center of his sea of chi. The other 4 seeds of mystic light were arranged according to the west gold, east wood, north water, and south fire. Zhang Yan found to his surprise that the last earth elemental seed of mystic light didn't need the cloud sand to form on its own. After thinking about it and combining it with the details of his cultivation, he understood. The 5 elements created each other. After the metal elemental seed was formed, he used the metal-type seed and the water-type seed formed faster. He then used the water-type seed to nourish the water-type seed, and the water-type seed to strengthen the fire-type seed. Once the 4 elements were formed and used at the same time, the excess essence would have nowhere to go and would form the earth-type seed. Therefore, there was no need to use the cloud sand at all. No wonder the speed at which he refined the mystic seed became faster and faster. However, this was also because he was in a demonic cave and the essence was endless. If he was on the Spirit Page Island, he wouldn't be able to do this. Now that I've formed all 5, I'll be able to cultivate the 5-direction 5 elemental great mystic true light after I reach the mystic light realm. Thinking up to here, he suddenly saw a 5-colored light around his body. It was as if he could move mountains and drain oceans with just a slight movement. He couldn't help but smile and say, "You've come to disturb me again." It turned out that those Huanma had come again. This time, they felt his desire for great divine power, so they automatically showed him an illusion, luring him to fall into it. If his mind was bewitched, more and more devils would take advantage of him. In the end, his soul would be scattered, and he would become a walking corpse. Zhang Yan didn't have the heart to chase them away. One had to know that the deeper he went into the demonic cave, the more demons there were. There were countless demons and illusionary demons, and they were extremely annoying. In the beginning, he had tried to kill them, but he was already used to it. Most of the time, he just ignored them. After all, as long as his mind was unaffected, they couldn't do anything to him. Looking at the illusions around him, he was about to take out a mind-calming pill and eat it. However, at this moment, his heart moved and he put down the pill. He purposely thought about the scenes from his previous life, as well as the images of his friends and comrades that he had fought with. Sure enough, after being influenced by his thoughts, a few figures appeared in front of his eyes one after another. Looking at those familiar yet unfamiliar figures, Zhang Yan first sighed in disappointment. Then, with a carefree smile, he said, "Is this the flaw in my heart? Thank you all for letting me see myself clearly so that I won't be taken advantage of by this expert in the future." The instant he said this, he suddenly felt as if the gap in his mind was filled up by something. His soul and body became even closer, and there were no longer any flaws. When he looked up again, the illusions in front of him had already disappeared. Chapter 86. Seeing the cave become peaceful once more, Zhang Yan smiled faintly. With the help of the illusion world, he had cut off all his worries and cleared his thoughts. At this moment, his mind was clear, and the demons all retreated and didn't bother him anymore. However, he also understood that the demons were just temporarily unable to enter. In reality, they were still waiting on the side for a chance. As long as he showed a sliver of weakness, they would all attack him together. One had to know that the human heart was fickle. Not only was it easy to be bewitched by external objects, but as long as there was an obsession in one's heart, if one did not cultivate their Tao heart to perfection, as time passed, other flaws would slowly appear. However, there were a lot less annoying things right now, which was an unexpected gain. Now that his Xian seed had formed, he only needed to cultivate according to the Draco E metal technique and refine the metal and fire Xian lights. Then, he wouldn't need to be afraid of normal mystic light realm cultivators. More importantly, he could only use one treasure to work with the sword ball, but once he became a mystic light realm cultivator, he would be able to use 2 treasures at the same time, and his battle power would increase greatly. In the next few days, he sat in the cave and cultivated, and the metal and fire Xian lights in his body became stronger. One day, he came out of his meditation and calculated the time. He had already stayed here for 10 days. According to this speed, he would be able to reach the mystic light realm in half a month's time. The only thing he needed to worry about was that the master the two Blood Soul sect disciples talked about was about to arrive. At that time, he might not even be able to stay alive, let alone cultivate. It seemed like he would have to kill his way out of the demonic cave on the 15th day. Right as he was thinking, he heard some movement outside the cave, as if someone was approaching. Zhang Yan's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Could it be a disciple of the Blood Soul sect? He made a hand seal, and the star's sword pellet leaped above his head. Then, it transformed into a blue light of crystal sand that wrapped around his entire body. With a flash of light, a blue light flew out from the exit at the back of the cave. However, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he circled around and found a higher place to see who had come here. Looking down, his eyebrows rose up and he thought, it's this person. There were a total of 4 people standing below. All of them were covered in blood and looked battered and exhausted, as if they had just gone through a tough battle. Meanwhile, the Han family disciple whom he'd met once in front of the Guardian Palace stood in the middle, but he was surrounded by the other 3. One of the middle-aged cultivators who seemed to be the leader said, Han Ji, we are only following orders to take your life today. Don't blame us. If you are willing to stretch out your neck to be executed, we can fulfill your wish and let your origin spirit go. Han Ji revealed a forlorn smile. Father really wants you to do it. I thought he would leave me here to fend for myself. He sighed again and said, this is the devil's lair. Once my primordial spirit comes out, I'm afraid I'll be eaten by the devils. What difference does it make if I stay here or not? But there's still something I don't understand. Han Chuanda, can you tell me? The middle-aged cultivator nodded expressionlessly. Speak. Han Ji's expression was slightly agitated. My father has never liked me since I was young. He even tried to find an excuse to kill me many times. Fortunately, my mother protected me many times, allowing me to escape with my life. I just don't understand. Why does he want to get rid of me? The middle-aged cultivator hesitated for a moment before saying, at this point, I won't hide it from you anymore. Before you were born, I asked someone in the sect who was good at divination to divine your fate. The result of the divination was that you would harm your father. Do you understand now? Han Ji was startled. Then, a hint of anger flashed in his eyes. His body trembled as he said, so it's because of this reason? The middle-aged cultivator nodded affirmatively. That's right. Han Ji looked up to the sky and laughed bitterly. He pulled at the clothes in front of his chest and said sternly, I, Han Ji, swear to the heavens that if I don't die today, I will definitely destroy the Han family in the future. His shrill laughter echoed in the surroundings. When the middle-aged cultivator heard this, his expression darkened. He waved his hand and said, do it. Zhang Yan saw everything clearly from where he was. Although Han Ji was a disciple of a large family, it seemed that he hadn't learned the true inheritance. He lacked the means to fight. Not long after, he was knocked to the ground. He could only rely on the green smoke coming from the incense burner to protect himself, gritting his teeth and holding on. After a few glances, he didn't want to interfere in such a personal grudge. Just as he was about to leave, Han Ji's unwilling gaze flashed in his mind. After thinking for a moment, he said to himself, fine, I'll save you today. He took out a robe from the dead Blood Soul sect disciple's sleeve. First, he made some noise. Then, he formed a seal and used a sword pellet to lift the robe into the air. It floated faintly in the air a few times. As expected, this movement immediately attracted the attention of the people below. One of them cried out in alarm, not good, the people from Blood Soul sect are chasing us. The middle-aged cultivator looked back, and his expression instantly changed. He had been chased by the Blood Soul sect disciples all the way here, and he was already frightened. At this moment, how could he still care about taking Han Ji's life? He hurriedly said, go. With a stomp of his foot, he hurriedly escaped with the other two. Seeing their fleeing figures, Zhang Yan smiled slightly and appeared. He slowly walked to Han Ji and said, "Are you okay?" Han Ji lay on the ground, still panting. He looked up and saw Zhang Yan walking over. He couldn't help being stunned and said, "Senior brother Zhang." "Just now." Then, he seemed to think of something and struggled to stand up. He raised his hands and bowed deeply. "Thank you, senior brother, for saving my life." Zhang Yan accepted his bow calmly and said, "En? You know me?" Han Ji looked at him with an excited expression and said, "Senior brother Zhang made Zhuang Bufan lose face last time. All the disciples of aristocratic families have heard about it. That day, you were with us in the Guardian Palace, so how could I not know you? I only hate that I was watched by a few servants that day and couldn't come and meet senior brother." Zhang Yan looked at him and saw a trace of admiration in his eyes. He shook his head and pointed to the cave not far away, saying, "This place is empty and eye-catching. Why don't senior brother follow me in? I still have a few things to ask senior brother Han." Han Ji hurriedly took a step back and cupped his hands, saying, "I don't dare. If senior brother has any questions, I will tell you everything I know." Zhang Yan nodded and took the lead to walk forward. Han Ji waited until Zhang Yan had walked past him before following behind. The two of them entered the cave and sat down. Zhang Yan casually tossed Han Li and Qi replenishing pill and asked, "Brother Han, did you see senior marshal brother Xie Zong Yuan and the others when you entered this devil cave?" Hearing Zhang Yan's question, Han Ji put down the pill and sat up straight before answering, "I saw them. There were a few disciples of the Blood Soul sect here at that time, but after we defeated them, we separated. I heard that when you fought, the other party had a very powerful Blood Soul. Senior brother Han is a disciple of an aristocratic family. Do you know what realm this person is at?" Han Ji thought seriously and said, "Other than its erratic body, this Blood Soul's face is like a real person's, so it must be a core transformation cultivator." At this moment, he revealed a look of relief. Fortunately, senior brother Fang Zhen had the 5-fire divine weapon ring with him at that time. That was how we managed to injure this Blood Soul. However, if he had sent a few more Blood Souls here, we would have no choice but to wait for death. Hearing this, Zhang Yan was surprised and said, "How can the Blood Soul of a core transformation cultivator be injured so easily?" Han Ji explained, "Senior marshal brother Zhang, you don't have to be surprised. There are more than 100 Blood Souls of core formation cultivators, and there are good and bad ones among them. The powerful Blood Souls won't be released easily. Since they can travel thousands of miles, they must be used to scout or monitor the disciples." Zhang Yan thought for a while and sighed. "If that's the case, it looks like I can't cultivate here for long. On the 15th day, when the heavenly ocean eye opens, I'll kill my way out. However, if that's the case, I'll probably need a year and a half to reach the mystic light realm. I won't be able to make it to the Battle of the Three Lakes." Hearing this, Han Ji didn't say anything. He only lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. After a long time, he raised his head and said slowly, "Just now, Mr. Zhang saved my life, and I can't repay you. If senior brother trusts me, I can try to help you cultivate for 2 months. "Oh." Zhang Yan looked at him and asked curiously, "May I ask how senior brother Han can do it?" Han Ji raised his sleeve and took out a porcelain bottle. He said, "I heard that senior brother Zhang is a disciple of the Chancellor Zhou. You must recognize this." Zhang Yan took it, opened the bottle, and smelled it. His eyes focused, and he said uncertainly, "This is the mystic blood pill?" Han Ji nodded and said, "That's right. Senior brother has good eyes. This is the mystic blood pill that spiritual master Ru Huang of the Blood Soul sect made. 100 years ago, perfected master Ru Huang was a famous demonic cultivator in the Donghua continent. This person was unscrupulous and killed cultivators of the Xianmen sect at will. It was to the point where even the Shueshua sect had to expel him from the sect. However, this person was also a genius. At that time, he had already cultivated to the point where his blood soul and his soul could be combined and dispersed at will. As long as all his blood souls were not destroyed, it was impossible to kill him. Later, for some reason, he was surrounded and attacked by 6 spiritual masters of the East Hua continent. Only then was he completely eliminated. Han Ji pointed at the mysterious blood pill and said, "Back then, my ancestor also participated in this battle." This mysterious blood pill was obtained from the demon body. This pill is useless to us cultivators of the celestial sect of wonders, but to the disciples of the 6 great demon sects, it is a miraculous elixir. If he sees this elixir, he will immediately swallow it and refine it. Without a few months, he will not be able to complete it. In this way, we can buy at least 2 months for senior brother. Zhang Yan returned the mystic blood pill and said with a smile, "Senior brother Han's method is good, but how are you going to give this pill to that person? Even if you give it to him voluntarily, aren't you afraid that the other disciples of the Blood Soul sect will take it for themselves?" Han Ji's expression was a little sad. He said, "I was injured in my mother's womb and have a congenital deficiency. It is impossible for me to improve and cultivate Xian arts in this life. However, if I join the demon sect, I might have a chance to achieve enlightenment." After a pause, he looked at Zhang Yan and said, "And this mystic blood pill is the gift to me." Chapter 87. Hearing Han Ji's words, Zhang Yan looked at him and smiled. "Senior brother Han, you actually have the mysterious blood pill with you. Did you already have a plan? Or did you already know that there were Blood Soul sect disciples here?" Han Ji smiled bitterly. "Senior brother Zhang, you misunderstand. I have been stuck in my cultivation for 6 years. I know that I have no hope in this life, so I have long wanted to switch to demonic arts. Last year, I spent a lot of effort to obtain a demonic scripture. I originally planned to use this opportunity to enter the demonic cave to capture demons to cultivate and then consume this pill to increase my cultivation. I really did not expect that there would be Blood Soul sect disciples here." As if to increase his persuasiveness, he took out a book from his sleeve and held it with both hands, handing it to Zhang Yan. "Senior brother, look, this is it." Zhang Yan took a look and saw the words, "Origin Seeking Scripture." He nodded, knowing that this was a cultivation technique equal to the clear breath scripture in the demonic sections. However, to practice this cultivation technique, he would have to repeat all his previous cultivation techniques. Zhang Yan could not help but look at Han Ji in a different light. After all, there were not many people who could be so ruthless as to waste 20 or 30 years of cultivation in one night. Han Ji's face showed a trace of bitterness. "There are many Blood Soul sect disciples here. If I tell them my background, they will not make things too difficult for me." Zhang Yan thought about it and found that it was true. If Han Ji joined the Blood Soul sect, even if they did not accept him, they would not do anything to him for the time being. Firstly, the Han family was one of the 5 great families of Qinsang school. They had a special identity and could be used in many ways. Secondly, Han Ji was familiar with the inner workings of Qinsang school and even knew many secrets of large clans. This was not something that could be easily found out. Thirdly, he had a grudge against the Han family. He was willing to cripple his cultivation and even gave the mysterious blood pill. This karma was too great, and the person who accepted him would have to repay it. Moreover, taking a step back, even if Han Ji failed to become Zhang Yan's disciple, it was impossible for Zhang Yan not to accept the mysterious blood pill. Devil sect disciples would not be able to resist the temptation of a devil pill that could increase one's cultivation. This was extremely beneficial to Zhang Yan himself. If no core transformation cultivators came, Zhang Yan was confident that even if he was no match for them, he would be able to escape in time. However, he did not know how many Blood Soul sect disciples there were or how strong they were. Fortunately, the 15th of the month was approaching. If Fang Zhen, Xie Zongyuan, and the others wanted to escape, they would have to go to the entrance of the Devil's Cave. He believed that the disciples of the Blood Soul sect would definitely be prepared. The disciples that could be mobilized would definitely be present. At that time, the two sides would definitely have a fierce battle to the death. At that time, he could head over to investigate. If there weren't any almighty cultivators in the other party, then he could rest assured and cultivate here. If there were, then he could fight to the death, and whether or not he could charge out of the devil cave would depend on his own fortune. At this thought, Zhang Yan looked at Han Ji and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Han, have you made up your mind?" Han Ji's expression was resolute as he said resolutely, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhang, you were born a commoner, but you were able to enter the lower house and become a true disciple. This is something that only happens once in 100 years. Although I, Han Ji, am not as good as Senior Marshal Brother, I still have the determination to pull myself together. If I don't try, how can I be satisfied?" At this moment, they heard a cold snort from outside the cave. I was wondering who it was. So it's Zhang Yan, you little thief, who is playing tricks behind the scenes. And Han Ji, you better obediently accept your death so that you don't cause any more trouble. As this voice rang out, a middle-aged cultivator with a long and narrow face strode into the cave. Han Ji suddenly stood up, his eyes filled with anger as he said, "Han Chuanda. It's you." Seeing this person, Zhang Yan did not move. There was not a hint of surprise on his face. He only sighed and said, "Since you've already left, why did you come back to die?" Hearing this, Han Chuanda laughed out loud and said sternly, "Zhang Yan, you dare to interfere in my Han clan's matters? No wonder Junior Marshal Brother Feng said that you would definitely be an obstacle for my clan in the future. Looks like he was right." However, he was only half right. If you die here today, there will naturally be nothing else. Junior Marshal Brother Feng? Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed, and a hint of light suddenly flashed across them. The sword pellet in his hand was full of vigor. Han Chuanda then turned to Han Ji and pointed at him, saying, "Han Ji, so that mysterious blood pill is in your hands. Was it stolen by that dead mother of yours? Humph. Coming from a small family, your hands are indeed dirty." Han Ji's eyes turned red as he pointed at him and roared, "Han Chuanda, you're just a servant that has been bestowed a surname. What right do you have to say that about me? You insulted my mother today, I swear I'll kill you." Having been exposed, Han Chuanda couldn't keep his face any longer. Seeing that the two of them were about to attack, he was alarmed. The cave was narrow, and he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to unleash his full power. Therefore, he simply leaned back and flew out of the cave, shouting, "Junior brothers, let's attack together. Kill these two and go back to claim the merit. The family head will naturally reward you handsomely." Two replies came from outside. When Zhang Yan and Han Ji walked out of the cave together, they found three people standing in the air. The person on the left held a wind thunder trident, and there seemed to be crackling lightning flashing across it. The person on the right held a heavy gold-painted wooden alms bowl. It did not seem to be an ordinary item either. As for Han Chuanda, he pulled out a long belt that looked like mist. As he swung it, it was as resplendent as the stars, dazzling. The reason the three of them were able to repeatedly escape the pursuit of the Blood Soul sect disciples was because they also had their own Dharma treasures. It was just that they had not used them against Han Ji earlier. Now that they were facing Zhang Yan, the title of a true disciple was still very intimidating. They immediately took out their Dharma treasures. When Han Ji saw this, his expression changed drastically. He said, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhang, be careful. That's the wind thunder trident, the cloud-filling alms bowl, and the purple star river's moon net." He then stared at Han Chuanda and said, "Han Chuanda, as expected, Auntie is behind all of this. Otherwise, where did you get the purple star river's moon net?" Han Chuanda laughed loudly again. He said, "Han Ji, did you only understand today? Let me tell you the truth. The reason your dead old mother was able to steal that cultivation technique was because of Madam's intention. After you cultivated the cultivation technique, Madam also ordered someone to secretly report this matter to Old Master. Only then did he order her to be beaten to death. When Han Ji heard this, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His blood and chi surged, and he was about to charge forward without a care for anything. However, his shoulder was pressed down by a hand. Turning back, he saw Zhang Yan shaking his head at him. He said, "Brother Han, leave first. I'll handle this." Han Ji immediately calmed down. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "Senior Marshal Brother, I understand what you mean. My cultivation is weak, and I can't be of any help, but I can't be a burden to you either. I, Han Ji, am a man of character, and my words carry enormous weight. If I go back on my words, may the heavens and earth destroy me, and my soul perish." After saying that, he cupped his fists at Zhang Yan, turned around, and flew away without looking back. Trying to escape. Han Chuanda frowned. He waved his hand and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Fu, go stop him. Don't let him escape." "Yes." The cultivator holding the Tempest Trident responded. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw a dot of blue light flying through the air to stop him. He snorted and waved his trident. In an instant, a gust of black wind swept up from the ground, and there was a faint sound of green thunder exploding within it. Just as the sword ball was about to be blocked by the black wind, the blue light suddenly lengthened. Out of nowhere, the light that was the size of half a fist became a 3-foot-long light shuttle. Its speed also suddenly doubled, and before the black wind could reach him, it pierced through his neck. Then, taking advantage of the momentum, it circled around and instantly beheaded him like cutting tofu. The headless corpse fell from the sky and was caught by the black wind. With a crackling sound, the Dharma robe and the jade pendant that protected him were destroyed. Finally, the black wind swept up the corpse, and in the blink of an eye, the flesh and blood were completely wiped out, leaving no trace. The Tempest Trident, which had lost its owner's control, also fell from the sky and fell to the ground with a clatter. In just one move, Zhang Yan had killed one person, and the remaining 2 were shocked. "Junior Marshal Brother, be careful. This Zhang Yan has already condensed the seed of mysterious light, and he can change the sword ball at will." Han Chuanda's face was solemn, but his back was drenched in cold sweat. If the sword ball had been aimed at him from the beginning, he would have been cut down by the sword. Moreover, if this Zhang Yan had borrowed the sword ball and wanted to escape, Han Chuanda wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. Seeing that there was no sound beside him for a long time, he turned his head and said anxiously, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and release the sand of glamour." The other cultivator immediately came back to his senses. He quickly opened the lid of the alms bowl, raised it high above his head, and poured it in front of him. In an instant, there was a rumbling sound, and like a river bursting its banks, clouds of crimson-colored sand tumbled out from the mouth of the alms bowl and surged towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan dodged into the air, but the sand seemed to have a mind of its own. It followed him into the air and let out a rumbling sound like the tide. A ferocious smile appeared on Han Chuanda's face. He didn't attack Zhang Yan from all sides. Instead, he dragged the Violet Star River's moon net in his hand and flew off in another direction. However, wherever he passed, the moon net would drag out a long streak of light that was over a meter wide. After going back and forth a few times, the sky and the earth were shrouded by the brilliant mist that seemed to be dotted with stars. Han Chuanda stood high in the air, and with a flick of his hand, another streak of mist appeared. He laughed loudly and said, "Zhang Yan, you have the sword ball in your hand, so you can turn into light and escape. I can't do anything to you, but now that the surroundings are filled with mist, it can be said to be an inescapable net. Let's see where you can escape to." Zhang Yan raised his head and saw that everywhere around him was shrouded in mist. The cultivator who fell with the sand of glamour had already arrived above his head at an extremely fast speed, sealing off his only escape route. Seeing the bright red cloud of sand pouring down from the sky, he sneered and took out a gray talisman. He threw it into the air and chanted a spell, saying, "Grow." The talisman instantly turned into a tortoise shell-like object about 4 feet in size in the air. There were cloud patterns, seal characters, mountains, rivers, fishes, and insects on its back. It stood on top of his head with its mouth facing downwards. A ray of light poured down and enveloped his entire body. When the rolling cloud of sand came near, it automatically parted to the sides as if it had encountered a rock. Zhang Yan took a step forward and knocked away the cloud. He sneered and said, "You want to stop me with just the likes of you?" Chapter 88. After Zhang Yan rushed out of the area shrouded by the clouds, he retracted the pure qi shield on his head and attached the mysterious light seed to the sword pellet. With a flash of light, he flashed out and once again arrived in the sky. He stopped and swung his sleeve, smashing the heart-striking hammer towards the head of the cultivator holding the cloud-filling alms bowl. The cultivator didn't expect that Zhang Yan, who was originally heavily surrounded, would actually appear in front of him in the blink of an eye. Seeing a big hammer emitting a red glow flying towards him, he immediately knew that it was a magic weapon. At this moment, he didn't have time to dodge, so he hurriedly used the cloud-filling alms bowl to block it. BSP, with a dang sound, a huge force came over, and the cloud-filling alms bowl in his hand flew out of his hand. A light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes, and he pointed forward with his fingers. The star sword pellet followed closely behind to kill him. Seeing this, the cultivator was extremely shocked and shouted, "Senior brother," before he finished speaking, a blue light had already flashed past his neck. Suddenly, his head was separated from his body, and he fell from the sky. Zhang Yan brushed past this person's corpse, and with a wave of his sleeve, he dispersed the original spirit. Then, he reached out to catch the fallen cloud-filling alms bowl and threw it into the universe cultivation pouch. With an indifferent expression, he said, "Your senior brother can't even protect himself, so how can he save you?" After saying that, he slowly raised his head and looked up. Although his eyes were calm, Han Chuanda, who was above, felt a chill in his heart. Even the hand that was holding the purple star river moon net trembled slightly. Up until now, not even a moment had passed since the battle with Zhang Yan, and his side had already lost 2 people. He knew that the situation was not good, and immediately wanted to retreat. With a wave of the Luo Dai, a bright cloud scattered out as a cover, and he turned around to run. Looking at his back, Zhang Yan revealed a trace of ridicule at the corner of his mouth. He reached out and took the wind thunder trident that had fallen on the ground into his hand out of thin air. He also threw it into his sleeve, and only then did he use an escape light to chase all the way. His flying light was extremely fast, and in just a few breaths, he had caught up. Han Chuanda groaned inwardly. Fighting against cultivators who used sword pellets was the most troublesome. If these cultivators had the help of a good sword pellet, they would be able to move extremely fast, coming and going as they pleased. On the other hand, if Han Chuanda was not careful, he would lose his life. How could he dare to turn his back on Zhang Yan? He hurriedly stopped moving and shook his belt with all his might, causing it to produce patches of multicolored clouds that protected his entire body. At this moment, he didn't seek to be meritorious, but he only sought to avoid making mistakes, and he only sought to preserve his life. When Zhang Yan got close, he retracted his sword light and revealed himself. When he saw the situation in front of him, he sneered and formed a hand seal. The stellar sword orb leaped into the air and slashed down from above. At the same time, the Rui spirit shuttle circled around under his control and rushed toward Han Chuanda's back. After repeatedly attacking the enemy's rear, he was already very adept at using the 2 weapons in his hands to attack from all angles. For a moment, 2 rays of light, one green and one blue, circled and chased Han Chuanda up and down, forcing him to use the purple star river and moon net to resist with all his might. However, even though he appeared to be in a very sorry state, regardless of whether it was the divine Rui shuttle or the stellar sword orb, neither of them were able to cut through the dazzling bands of clouds. As soon as they came into contact with the bands of clouds, they would either be gently bounced off or become slightly sluggish. Han Chuanda shouted in the multicolored light, "Zhang Yan, you and I have no enmity, so why do you have to force me? If you let me go, I will naturally remember your benefits and repay you in the future. Otherwise, I will accompany you to the end today, and let's see what you can do to me." When Zhang Yan heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. "Do you think I can't do anything to you?" He stretched out his hand and summoned the Rui spirit shuttle back. Then, he cast the mellow spirit shield above his head. In an instant, a ray of light fell down and enveloped his body. Then, he took a step forward and collided with the thick multicolored clouds. With a boom, the multicolored clouds scattered in all directions, and the scene in front of him suddenly became empty, revealing Han Chuanda's horrified expression. Before he could react, a ray of blue light flashed by, and with a "chi" sound, his head flew high into the air, and he died on the spot. Zhang Yan waved his hand, and the stellar sword orb twisted, crushing Han Chuanda's original spirit and corpse into pieces. He made a hand seal and recalled the sword orb. Then, he saw the purple star river and moon net slowly floating down from the sky. He took a few steps forward and grabbed it in his hand. He took a closer look and thought to himself, "This item is suitable for female cultivators. I have quite a few magic treasures now, so I might as well take them back and give them to fellow Taoist Luo." At this moment, he seemed to have sensed something and looked into the distance. There seemed to be light flashing there, and it was obvious that a cultivator was rushing over on a flying ship or some sort of magic treasure. His expression changed slightly, and he thought to himself, "I might as well see who it is before making a fuss." He pressed down the cloud and looked left and right. He saw a pile of rocks not far in front of him, and his eyes lit up. He took a few steps forward and hid. Not long after, a flying ship arrived in the sky above the place, and there were 2 Blood Soul sect disciples in black robes standing on it. One of them let out a "ah" and said, "I saw treasure light soaring into the sky just now, and there were faint sounds of killing. Why is it gone now that I'm close to it?" The other person observed the surroundings and sniffed, and said in a deep voice, "The spiritual vigor here is chaotic, and there is a lot of blood smell. There must be people fighting here, and they might not have gone far." Just as the 2 of them were talking, a muffled sound came from the sky, and they could not help but turn their heads to look. They saw a scarlet blood cloud soaring into the sky from afar, and it was like the glow of the setting sun. Even half of the sky was dyed red, and it was extremely eye-catching. The first person said in shock, "It's our Blood Soul sect's Yan Xuanyun. I'm afraid that one of the senior brothers intercepted the Qinsang school disciples and called us over to help." The other person said excitedly, "They actually used a Xuanyun, looks like they caught many big fish. Good. If we can catch all the Qinsang school disciples here, it will save us the trouble of searching around. You're right, let's go." The 2 of them turned the flying ship, turned around, and rushed towards the place where the red light came from. In a flash, they disappeared without a trace. Seeing the 2 of them leave, Zhang Yan came out from his hiding place. He looked up at the thick layer of blood in the distance, and his face looked thoughtful. After a while, a sharp light shot out of his eyes, and he raised his hand to summon the sword pill. In a flash, he also flew in that direction. He was extremely fast, and after about an hour, he saw figures flashing in the sky in front of him, and blood light flew everywhere. He carefully approached them and found a relatively high spot to hide himself. When he looked at the battlefield again, he discovered that there were actually 8 Blood Soul sect disciples surrounding Fang Zhen's group of 5. The 2 sides seemed to be in a stalemate. Although the Blood Soul sect disciples had the advantage in numbers, they only released their own blood souls to wander around the surroundings. They were not in a hurry to make a move. After a while, a few more people came out, and the number of people quickly exceeded 10. Once the Xuanyun came out, their fellow sect members that were scattered all over the place started to rush over. Feng Ming looked at the increasing number of Blood Soul sect disciples and said anxiously, "Senior Brother Feng, can we attack now? Fang Zhen's expression was relaxed, and he said, what's the rush? Let's wait a bit longer. When a few more Blood Soul sect disciples arrive, we'll kill them all at once. Feng Ming said worriedly, I'm just afraid that senior brother Xia and the others won't be able to hold on. Fang Zhen glanced at him and said unhappily, Xia Zongyuan is a disciple of the Xia family, and he naturally has methods to protect himself. Why do you need to worry? Furthermore, our plan this time is for them to lure away the profound light realm cultivator while we kill the rest of the Blood Soul sect disciples. If there are too few people, won't our original plan fail? Guard them well and kill a few more demonic path scoundrels. When we get back, I'll ask Master for a reward. Feng Ming hesitated for a moment before saying, Senior brother Fang, we're all in the demonic cave, and we're bound together. We're all disciples of the same sect, and even if we don't get along normally, we can't do anything here. If we don't attack now, I'm afraid that if that profound light realm cultivator of the Blood Soul sect leaves senior brother Xia behind and comes here, we won't be able to escape. Fang Zhen snorted, but he seemed to have listened to Feng Ming's words. He reluctantly took out a golden ring that was 3 feet long, and with a cold smile on his face, he threw it at a Blood Soul sect disciple who was holding a banner. When the Blood Soul sect disciple saw this, he immediately used the banner in his hand to block it, but someone next to him exclaimed, don't. Before the disciple could react, a flaming man covered in purple flames suddenly sprang out from the golden ring. As if it had a mind of its own, it pounced on the disciple and wrapped him up. The disciple spun on the spot and exploded with a loud bang. The disciple didn't even have time to scream before he was turned into a pile of ashes. Fang Zhen snorted coldly and raised his hand to call the golden ring back. A Blood Soul sect disciple yelled, Senior brothers, be careful. This is the 5-fire divine weapon ring, and it's the bane of evil. Master's Blood Soul was destroyed by this thing last time. As soon as these words were spoken, the surrounding Blood Soul sect disciples all took a few steps back and spread out in a circle. Clearly, they were rather fearful of this Dharma treasure. A mocking expression appeared on Fang Zhen's face as he laughed, since you know how powerful the treasure in my hand is, then obediently accept your death. He picked up the golden ring and threw it at another Blood Soul sect disciple. At this moment, a red light suddenly flew over from afar and blocked the path of the 5-fire divine weapon ring. With a clang, the golden ring was shaken back. Fang Zhen couldn't help but be surprised. He looked up and saw a cultivator in blood-red clothes standing in the field. This person's hair was disheveled and his face was handsome. However, his nose was hooked, his eyes were gloomy, and there was not a trace of blood on his face. When the Blood Soul sect disciples saw this, they all knelt on the ground and said respectfully, Greetings, Master. Zhang Yan, who was watching the battle from afar, was shocked when he heard this. Could this be the core formation cultivator? But when he looked carefully, he found that although this person looked no different from an ordinary person, his body was erratic, like a soul. He immediately relaxed. At first, Fang Zhen's expression changed drastically. But after a few glances, he laughed wildly towards the sky. I was wondering who it was. So it's a shadow form Blood Soul. If you're here with your real body, I'll definitely die. But now, you're not enough to scare me. What? Have you forgotten what you suffered last time? Chapter 89. The blood-robed cultivator placed his hands behind his back, as if he didn't care about Fang Zhen's words. He only glanced at Fang Zhen and said, Junior, I have other matters to attend to, so I won't argue with you. In 5 days, the CI of Qinsang School will reopen. I hope you will be able to leave alive at that time. With that, he glanced at where Zhang Yan was hiding and waved his hand behind him. Immediately, one of the Blood Soul sect disciples shouted in a loud voice, Master has ordered, retreat. The surrounding Blood Soul sect disciples didn't hesitate. They all put up their weapons and left. As for the blood-clothed cultivator, he stood there without moving. When there were no more Blood Soul sect disciples present, he looked deeply in Zhang Yan's direction. With a flash of blood-red light, he disappeared without a trace. Fang Zhen secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the Blood Soul had finally left. Although he said it was easy, this Blood Soul sect was able to push back the 5 fire divine weapons with one attack. It was much stronger than the Blood Soul sect he had met last time. If they fought, he wouldn't have any chance of winning. It would be best if they both stopped fighting. Zhang Yan, who was standing high up, stared at the blood-robed cultivator from the very beginning. Even when that person looked over, Zhang Yan didn't retreat. He had done this on purpose. The reason he did this was because he felt that the other side clearly had the advantage and there was no reason for them to retreat so easily. There had to be some other reason. Maybe the blood-robed cultivator was just bluffing. Therefore, he purposely provoked him and wanted to see how the other side would react. Only when the blood-robed cultivator retreated did he become more certain of his guess. Seeing the Blood Soul sect cultivators all retreat, he shook his head regretfully. What a pity. If the person standing below wasn't Fang Zhen but Xie Zongyuan, he would definitely suggest that he attack immediately. He would definitely be able to heavily injure these Blood Soul sect disciples. Thinking up to there, he thought that the situation today was because he wasn't strong enough. He could see the flaws but couldn't do anything. He wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could fight against more than 10 Blood Soul sect disciples by himself. However, if he was a mystic light realm cultivator, why would he need to worry so much? With a wave of his hand, he was able to annihilate all of them here. From this, it could be seen that one's own strength was the foundation of everything. Feng Ming had a slightly hesitant expression on his face. He glanced at Fang Zhen and said, Senior Brother Fang, since the members of Blood Soul sect have retreated, why don't we go receive Senior Brother Xie first, and we can discuss our next course of action. Fang Zhen snorted, his face filled with dissatisfaction as he nodded reluctantly, that's the only way. After leading his disciples for a distance of 50 kilometers, the blood-red-robed cultivator stopped on a high earthen slope, seemingly waiting for someone. Not long after, a blood-red rainbow streaked across the sky and landed on the ground, revealing Senior Brother Li's figure. However, he didn't come alone. Instead, he brought 2 people with him, one on his left and one on his right. He arrived in front of the blood-robed cultivator, knelt down, and said, Master, I didn't disappoint you. I've brought you here. A faint look of joy appeared on the blood-red-robed cultivator's face. He nodded his head, and his gaze landed on a young cultivator behind Senior Brother Li. He said happily, You are Han Ji from the Yunlang Han family? Han Ji hurriedly went up and bowed respectfully. He lowered his head and said, reporting to Senior, This one is indeed Han Ji. The blood-clothed cultivator looked at him again and said with a smile, Good, you're indeed a talented person. My Blood Soul sect has always been open to the public. Since you're interested in becoming my disciple, I naturally won't reject you. A look of joy appeared on Han Ji's face. He immediately knelt on the ground and said, Disciple greets Master. Seeing that Han Ji's expression wasn't forced at all, he nodded in satisfaction and said, No need to be so polite. Get up. I'll take you in as an in-name disciple for now. Once you see me in person, we'll go through the formal ceremony. What do you think? Han Ji said. It's all up to Master. The person standing to the right of Senior Brother Li said proudly, Master, Junior Brother Han and I hit it off at first sight. When I learned that he wanted to join our sect and was willing to give us a mysterious blood pill, I immediately sent him a message without delay. Senior Brother Li frowned and scolded, Li Weiman, Master is asking a question. Who are you to interrupt? Step down. Li Weiman smiled carelessly, as if he didn't care about the scolding at all. The blood-red-robed cultivator waved his hand and smiled. It's fine. I've done a good deed for the people. You don't have to be too harsh on me. Senior Brother Li hurriedly lowered his head and said, Yes. You're here. The blood-red-robed cultivator waved at Senior Brother Li. The latter understood and walked a few steps closer. He said in a low voice, "Master, what instructions do you have?" The blood-red-robed cultivator said in a low voice, "You're to leave tonight and personally escort your junior brother Han to my place. This matter is very important. There can't be any mistakes. Do you understand?" Li Weimin pondered for a moment and said awkwardly, "If I'm not there, I'm afraid the other senior brothers and junior brothers won't be able to resist the Qinsang School's cultivators." The blood-red-robed cultivator said indifferently, "It's fine. They've been frightened by me and won't have the guts to come again. Just don't provoke them for the next few days. You just have to send your junior brother Han here. When the time comes, I'll send someone to receive you. Just try to go back before the 15th day. Remember?" Li Weimin hurriedly took a step back and bowed. "I will obey Master's orders." The blood-red-robed cultivator made a sound of, "Oh." Then he sighed inexplicably. The 5-fire divine weapon ring is indeed a profound artifact. You'll have to be careful if you encounter it in the future. After saying this, his originally solid figure began to sway unsteadily. Starting from his feet, it slowly began to dissipate, followed by his knees, abdomen, chest, and head. He followed in the footsteps of the cultivator until his entire body completely disappeared. It turned out that Hua Kai had forcefully taken on the 5-fire divine weapon ring. Although he had managed to block it, the spirit in his blood soul had already been corroded by the imperial fire. Hua Kai had only been bluffing in front of Fang Zhen. If Fang Zhen had hardened his heart at that time and fought to the death, he might have been able to kill all the blood soul sect disciples present. Seeing this, Li Weimin's expression did not change. It was as if he had already expected the scene before him. Li Weimin walked to his side and stood still. He said proudly, "How is it? Big brother, I've done a great service this time, right?" Li Weimin did not comment. He only said, "Weimin, I'm here. You must block the group of Qinsang School disciples. Not a single one of them must escape. Otherwise, all the junior brothers from before would have died in vain." Li Weimin patted his chest. "Big brother, don't worry. We have a total of 18 people. Excluding the ones we killed, there are at most 10 Qinsang School disciples. How can we let him pass?" Li Weimin thought about it. He felt that even if Fang Zhen had the 5-fire divine weapon ring in hand, it shouldn't be a big problem to block the Qinsang School disciples for a while. Moreover, he should be able to return in time. He then reminded, "Don't be careless. Be careful." Li Weimin repeatedly agreed. "Big brother, hurry and take junior brother Han on his way. Don't let master wait." Li Weimin nodded. He said to Han Ji, "Junior brother, I'm sorry." A blood-colored light appeared from the top of his head and wrapped around him and Han Ji. They flew into the air and disappeared in a flash after confirming their location. At the same time, Fang Zhen's group, Xie Zongyuan, and the others had regrouped in a hidden cave in the demonic sect. Xie Zongyuan welcomed them in, and after they all sat down, he said, "Senior Marshal Brother Fang, that mystic light realm cultivator was chasing after us, but he suddenly left for some reason. I thought that he saw through our plan and was worried about you guys, but I can relax now that I see that you guys are fine." Lu Tao, who was sitting next to him, glanced at Fang Zhen and said, "How many disciples of the Blood Soul sect did Senior Brother Fang kill in this battle?" Seeing Fang Zhen's expression become a little ugly, Feng Ming hurriedly clasped his hands and said, "Senior brothers, do you remember that extremely powerful blood soul when you first entered the demonic sect?" Xie Zongyuan said solemnly, "How could I not remember?" Luckily, Senior Brother Fang used the 5-fire divine weapon ring to force us back, which was why we were able to escape. He frowned and said, "What, did you meet this person again?" Feng Ming said, "Senior Brother Fang has already lured the Blood Soul sect disciples to a place, but unfortunately, this person has sent another Blood Soul, and this one seems to be something even the 5-fire divine weapon ring can do nothing to, so we can only..." He let out a heavy sigh when he said that. Xie Zongyuan was a reasonable person, so there was no blame on his face. He only said, "This can't be blamed on senior brother Fang. It is already fortunate that we were able to escape." He then looked at Fang Zhen and clasped his hands. "Senior brother Fang, this way, if we want to escape the demonic sect in the next 15 days, there will be a fierce battle. We are on the same boat now, so we should advance and retreat together. How about we put aside our past grudges for now?" Fang Zhen snorted and clasped his hands in return. "I, Fang Zhen, am not a petty person. Since senior brother Xie has said so, then we can plan what to do in the demonic sect." Xie Zongyuan and Lu Tao behind him exchanged a look. They knew that Fang Zhen had not let go of the grudge in his heart, but Xie Zongyuan didn't care. At the very least, they had the same goal in escaping the demonic sect. As for returning to Qinsang School, as a disciple of the Xie clan, why should he care what Fang Zhen thought? At this time, a voice came from outside the cave. "Senior brothers, you are determined to break out of the demonic sect together. As a disciple of Qinsang School, I will fight with you all." Xie Zongyuan heard this and suddenly stood up. He said with surprise, "Senior brother Zhang, is that you?" Behind him, Lu Tao, Cheng'an, and Madame Chen also stood up. Fang Zhen's expression changed slightly. "Zhang Yan." There was a whoosh, and a blue light flashed in. When the light dissipated, Zhang Yan's figure appeared. He smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. "It's been 10 years since we parted, and now it's time to meet senior brothers again." Chapter 90. On the inner radiance level of the dragon tooth flying ship, Zhang Yan, Xie Zongyuan, and Lu Yu sat around a withered vine table. Although there were 3 white jade teacups on the table, they were empty. In this place, apart from the spiritual energy that was nourishing the chest and filling the lungs, there was also a beautiful scenery that added a bit of tranquility. Xie Zongyuan stood up and cupped his hands towards the two, saying apologetically, "This place is simple and crude, I can't properly entertain the two Shixiang." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "What are you talking about, senior brother? It's interesting to find joy in the midst of suffering. Moreover, we're waiting on senior brother's Dragon Fang flying ship, so we don't have to be afraid of any unwelcome guests. What more do we need to ask for?" Lu Tao smiled at the side and said, "Senior brother Xie, this dragon tooth flying ship has made a great contribution these few days. We have escaped with our lives many times because of this ship. This boat was given to me by my uncle." Xie Zongyuan sighed and said regretfully, "I originally wanted to return to the clan with this boat and become a mystic light realm cultivator, but I didn't expect so many things to happen. Qinsang School had a rule that only mystic light realm cultivators could come on the dragon tooth flying ship. The speed of this ship was comparable to a mystic light realm cultivator, so Xie Zongyuan and company were able to rely on this ship to avoid Li Wide's pursuit over the past 10 days. Previously, he had arranged for them to lure Li Wide away because they had this flying boat. Even if they couldn't defeat him, they could still escape." Lu Tao glanced at Zhang Yan and sighed, "Senior martial brother Zhang is quite fortunate to have formed a mystic light seed. He'll be able to reach the mystic light realm in less than a year." Zhang Yan knew that Lu Tao was indirectly inquiring about his whereabouts over the past few days. He smiled faintly and said, "That day, when I entered the CI, I was chased by 2 disciples of the Blood Soul sect and was forced to hide in a remote cave. I didn't think that it would be a good place to go. I immersed myself in cultivation for a few days, and when I came out, I had already formed a seed of profound light." Senior brother Xie clapped his hands and laughed, "How is this a fluke?" It was clear that senior brother's opportunity had arrived, but others could not be envious. Lu Tao nodded, but in his heart, he didn't think that it was only because of opportunity. In the past few days, they had been hiding here and there, avoiding the pursuit of the disciples of Blood Soul sect. Even though the spirit energy inside the devil cave was abundant, and they had the dragon tooth flying ship in their hands, so they did not have to worry about being caught, their hearts were always stretched taut. In the end, they could not truly calm down and cultivate. Zhang Yan was just one person, but he was able to accomplish this. That meant his mental fortitude was far above theirs. No wonder he could become a true disciple. Lu Tao couldn't help admitting his inferiority. Senior brother Zhang, what do you think are our chances of winning the battle on the 15th? Among the three of them, Zhang Yan's cultivation was the highest. Xie Zongyuan wanted to hear his opinion. Lu Tao also looked over, listening attentively. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment and slowly said, 80%. Xie Zongyuan said in surprise, so high. Zhang Yan's face was full of smiles. It's not that I'm talking nonsense, but as long as one of us rushes out, this battle will be considered a victory. Xie Zongyuan was startled, and then a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. Lu Tao's eyes flickered, and he said in a low voice, that's right, the reason why the disciples of Blood Soul sect want to kill us is just to cover up the news of the Devil Cave. If one of us rushes out, it will naturally be meaningless for them to continue chasing us. Zhang Yan nodded and said, Senior brother Lu is right. Moreover, once the sect finds out about this, they will definitely send cultivators with profound cultivation here. If the cultivators of the Blood Soul sect still refuse to leave, their fate can be predicted. Xie Zongyuan agreed, that makes sense, but in Senior brother Zhang's opinion, among us, who is more suitable to go out? Zhang Yan glanced at them, smiled faintly, and said, it's not up to me to decide. If everyone wants to go out, then no one can go out. But if we agree in advance to do our best to send 1 to 3 people out, there is still some hope. Moreover, it's not up to us to decide. Without Senior brother Fang's 5 fire divine weapons opening the way, who dares to say that they can go out? Xie Zongyuan thought for a moment, then said in a low voice, that's right, it seems that this matter is difficult for us to decide. We need to find Senior brother Fang to discuss it together. There's no time to lose, I'll go find him now. Just as he was about to get up, Lu Tao pressed him down, saying, Senior brother Xie, don't move, I'll go call them over. After Lu Tao went out, he called Fang Zhen and the others over in less than the time it took to eat a meal. Not only that, he also called Cheng'an, Madame Chen and the others over. Including the original Zhang Yan and the others, there were a total of 10 people sitting here. After everyone sat down, Xie Zongyuan repeated what Zhang Yan had just said. After he finished speaking, everyone was silent. After all, everyone had their own thoughts, and no one wanted to be the one to be left behind. Seeing the heavy atmosphere, Lu Tao chuckled and said, everyone, there is no need to worry. It's not certain death if we stay. With the dragon tooth flying ship, we will just have to hide for a while. At most, in half a month, when the CI opens, there will definitely be senior brothers with high cultivation coming down to save us. Although he said that, they were in a dangerous place, so they naturally wanted to leave if they could. Furthermore, no one was an idiot. Not to mention the mystic light realm cultivator, just the cultivator that could intimidate Fang Zhen with just a blood soul definitely had a higher cultivation. If he came, it would be impossible for them to escape with just the dragon tooth flying ship. Fang Zhen laughed coldly and turned to look at Zhang Yan. He said in a strange tone, Senior brother Zhang, you are a core disciple, so you must be the first to leave. Although everyone present already knew Zhang Yan's identity, they still looked at him strangely when they heard Fang Zhen's words. From their point of view, Zhang Yan was a core disciple and had the highest cultivation among them. According to their thoughts, he naturally had the right to leave. However, which one of them was truly willing to leave? However, Zhang Yan smiled faintly and replied, why do you say that, Senior brother Fang? Of course I won't leave. What? Everyone was surprised, and even Fang Zhen was surprised. Zhang Yan looked at everyone and said solemnly, as a core disciple, I usually enjoy the fruits of the sect's labor. Now that we are facing a battle, how can I abandon my fellow sect members? There is no such logic in this world. His words were filled with righteousness. At this moment, everyone's gazes toward him were filled with shame, admiration, and mockery. However, Fang Ji felt that it was slightly piercing to his ears. He felt that Zhang Yan was secretly mocking him for running away at the Little Wave Mountain. His expression instantly became ugly, but he couldn't do anything about it. However, who knew that Zhang Yan had already made up his mind to not leave this place until he reached the Mystic Light Realm. Furthermore, with Han Ji's help, that core formation cultivator wouldn't be able to come here for at least a month. Taking a step back, even if that Mystic Light Realm cultivator chased after him, he would just have to find another hidden cave to hide in. He really didn't believe that the Mo Chu was so big that the other party would be able to find him. At this moment, a faint sigh sounded out. Everyone looked over, only to see Madame Chen frowning as she spoke in a soft voice. "I'm extremely grateful for all the care and concern you've shown me over the past few days. I came to the Devil's Palace in order to find my husband. Since I haven't found him yet, I naturally won't leave." Hearing this, Feng Ming's blood surged. He also felt that only by staying would he be a disciple of the Qinsang school. Just when he was about to speak, he heard Lu Tao cough. "Actually, in my opinion, we should let senior brother Xia leave first." Fang Zhen laughed coldly. "Lu Tao, I remember that you came from the Frost Manual. When did you become the vanguard of the Xia clan?" Lu Tao said in a deep voice. "I have my reasons for saying this." "Senior brother Fang, why do you have to mock me?" Fang Zhen sneered. He leaned back and said, "Fine, then I want to hear what you have to say. Go ahead." Xie Zongyuan also frowned and said, "Junior brother Lu, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate, right?" Lu Tao said seriously, "Senior brother Xia, you are a disciple of the Xia clan. Only after you leave can we be at ease. No one else can." Xie Zongyuan was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Lu Tao cupped his hands at him and said, "Senior brother is a disciple of the Xia clan. After reporting the situation here to the sect, even if the sect can't react in time, you can ask the experts of the clan to come and save us." Qing'an, who didn't like to talk, suddenly opened his mouth and said, "This is reasonable." He stretched out his hand and handed over the talisman of the agarwood boat. He said in a deep voice, "Senior brother Xia, here. Our lives are all in senior brother's hands." Xie Zongyuan didn't rush to take it. Instead, he looked at Fang Zhen and said, "Senior brother Fang, what do you think?" Fang Zhen laughed and said, "Senior brother Xia, just take it. Lu Tao's words are reasonable." Once he agreed, the people behind him could only accept it even if they were unwilling. "Good." Xie Zongyuan nodded and took the agarwood boat. He looked around and said solemnly, "If I, Xie Zongyuan, am able to escape, I won't let you down." Fang Zhen's eyes flashed and he said, "It's just that it's not appropriate for senior brother Xia to escape alone. In my opinion, junior brother Feng is a disciple of Elder Sun. He can also be counted as one. What do you all think?" "Senior brother Feng, life." Feng Ming was startled. Then, he said with a face full of emotion, "Senior brother Fang, you go first." Fang Zhen laughed and patted his shoulder, saying, "I have the 5 Flames Divine Weapon Ring in my hands. What is there to fear? Don't worry and go." Zhang Yan looked at Fang Zhen meaningfully and said with a smile, "Junior brother Feng's talent is outstanding and his future is limitless. He really can't die here. I think this can be done." Xie Zongyuan looked at Lu Tao. Seeing that he didn't have any objections, he said, "Then it's decided. 5 days later, we will act according to this plan." Seeing that there was nothing else to do, Fang Zhen and the others stood up and left. Qing'an and Madame Chen didn't linger and returned to their own residence. Chapter 91. The dragon-tooth flying ship was 100 meters in size, and it was covered with a pavilion. There were no less than 100 cabins in the cabin, and it could accommodate over 100 people. So long as they weren't surrounded by a large number of cultivators, it was extremely safe on this ship. For the battle on the 15th day, Fang Zhen's group also stayed on the ship. However, they were a distance away from Xie Zongyuan and company, avoiding each other. Zhang Yan randomly chose a cabin to stay in on the first floor of the attic. He saw the scenery outside the window rapidly passing by on both sides, but there was no tremor under his feet. It was still as if he was walking on flat ground. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Once the restrictions on the dragon-tooth flying ship were fully activated, normal flying swords and magical treasures wouldn't be able to break it. Adding on this speed, they could even crash through it. However, the restrictions on this ship could only be activated by cultivators at the Mystic Light realm. It was a waste of such a good flying magical treasure. At this moment, he suddenly heard footsteps outside the door, and then someone said, "Is Senior Marshal Brother Zhang here? Lu Tao has come to visit." Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and opened the door. Seeing Lu Tao standing outside, he cupped his hands and said apologetically, "Sorry to disturb Senior Marshal Brother's peace." Zhang Yan saw that Lu Tao had come to find him alone and knew that he had something to say. He gestured with his hand and said, "Not at all. Senior Marshal Brother Lu, please come in and sit." Lu Tao came in and sat down. He went straight to the point and said, "I came here tonight to ask Senior Brother for a favor." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "Senior Marshal Brother, tell me about it." Lu Tao sighed faintly and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhang, you know that the battle in 5 days will be very dangerous. I don't know how many of us will survive. I have a junior whose parents died when she was young, and I usually take care of her. If I die in this battle, I want to ask Senior Marshal Brother to give this to her." He raised his sleeve and took out a jade talisman. He placed it on the table carefully. There were 7 holes on this jade pendant, and there was a dragon on it. Although it was filled with spirit chi and would be priceless in the mortal world, it wasn't much in the eyes of cultivators. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. Was Lu Tao asking him for a favor? However, he couldn't help but be somewhat puzzled. "Senior Brother Lu, I'm someone who's going to stay behind in the Devil's Cave. It's hard to say whether I'll live or die. Wouldn't it be safer to hand this thing over to Senior Brother Xia rather than me?" Lu Tao didn't answer. Instead, he smiled and said, "Senior Brother, do you know why I invited you to cultivate in this Devil's Chamber?" Zhang Yan sat up straight and said, "I'd like to hear the details." He had always been suspicious about this question, not knowing what Lu Tao's motive was. Lu Tao said solemnly, "I was originally born in the Frost Manual. However, my family had long declined. I originally thought that there was no hope for me to cultivate. However, when I was 10, I was guided by my master and was able to cultivate in Immortaling Island. Today, it's been over 20 years. My master is a disciple of the same master and disciple lineage. In my heart, there's no distinction between master and disciple or family." As he said this, he pointed to the jade pendant on the table and sighed, "As for this junior of mine, her talent is extremely high. Originally, I wanted her to become a disciple of a fellow disciple. However, after my master met her, he said that in Immortaling Island, no one could be her teacher. He told me not to mention it again. Thus, I could only drop the matter. These 2 years, I've always wanted to find a good teacher for her. Unfortunately, my wish never came true. It was only after I heard of Senior Brother's great name that I started to have thoughts." He lifted his head and looked at Zhang Yan with a burning gaze. "I heard that Senior Brother is a disciple that Taoist Yu Ji Yan values highly. You're also on good terms with Senior Brother Ning Chong and Xian Ning. Furthermore, you're a direct disciple of Zhou Institute. This elder is of the same generation as the sect head ancestor, and he has a wide network of friends. If I can form a relationship with you, you just have to casually mention it and I'll be able to ask Senior Brother to help that junior find a good teacher." Lu Tao spoke frankly. Today, he spoke his mind in front of Zhang Yan. However, Zhang Yan didn't dislike it. Helping one's junior was human nature. Moreover, whether this matter succeeded or not, it was entirely up to him. It wasn't something that others could control. Lu Tao stood up and gave a deep bow to Zhang Yan. 5 days later, if I'm able to break out of the demon cave, then there's no need to mention anything. If I can't, then I'd like to ask senior brother to pass this item to my junior. If she sells it, even if she can't cultivate, it would be enough for her to live a life of riches. Zhang Yan understood that Lu Tao was clearly asking him to pass the jade pendant to him. In reality, he wanted him to find a good teacher for his junior. However, he was afraid that Zhang Yan would reject him, so he didn't say it out loud. After pondering seriously for a moment, he stretched out his hand to take the jade pendant and said, "If I'm able to survive this battle and come out unscathed, then I can pass this jade pendant to senior brother. As for the rest, it'll depend on fate." Lu Tao seemed to have put down a burden in his heart when he heard Zhang Yan's reply, and he solemnly cupped his hands and said, "Then thank you senior brother. I'm eternally grateful. Since it's like this, I won't disturb senior brother's cultivation any longer and will take my leave now." Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his hands together, but did not try to persuade him to stay. After sending Lu Tao off, Zhang Yan tossed this matter aside and stretched his hand into his sleeve, intending to withdraw the Tempest Trident and the other magic treasures to wipe off the blood essence. Just as he was flipping through them, his hand slightly stopped as he suddenly noticed that a book had appeared in his sleeve. He took it out to take a look and realized that it was the Devil's Doctrine's secret, source-seeking scripture, that Han Ji had given him. At that time, because he was too busy talking, he did not have the time to return it to Han Ji. Later on, when Han Xingde barged in, he casually tossed it into his sleeve pocket. Bu, however, this book was useless to him, so he did not even bother to look at it. The Devil's Doctrine was different from the Xianmen. The Xianmen focused on the physical body as a raft to cross the sea, while the Devil's Doctrine focused on the soul as the essence and the physical body as fuel. In the end, they would abandon the physical body. The two were fundamentally different paths. This was also one of the reasons why Han Ji had chosen the Devil's Doctrine. Because he was congenitally deficient and his essence was damaged, he had no hope of reaching the Great Tao if he walked the Xianmen path. However, since Han Ji had joined the Blood Soul sect, he probably would not be able to use this book. Zhang Yan was just about to put the book away when he stopped halfway. He suddenly remembered that Han Ji and he could not use it, but it did not mean that no one else could. There was one person who was most suitable to cultivate this book at this moment. He took out a beautiful piece of jade from his sleeve pocket and placed it on the table. Tapping it with his finger, he said, "Sui Yang, come out." "Old master, what matter do you have to summon me for?" A green aura rose from the beautiful jade and transformed into a human figure. It was Sui Yang who was hiding inside. Zhang Yan looked at him in surprise. This Sui Yang was originally dispirited and listless, but after not seeing him for so many days, he was brimming with health and vigor. When he was summoned, he actually appeared from the jade. Sui Yang immediately knelt down and said, "It is all thanks to old master for bringing this lowly one here. This lowly one is here today." It turned out that there was no sunlight here, and the underground was filled with yin energy. To Sui Yang, it was a great nourishment. Thus, these few days had been very nourishing. Not only was his damaged primordial spirit slowly recovering, but his soul was also showing signs of stabilizing. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Your opportunity has come. I have a scripture to give to you. However, you have to swear never to betray me first." When Sui Yang heard this, he wasn't startled but happy instead. It was as if he was afraid that Zhang Yan would go back on his word. He hurriedly pointed to the heavens and swore as viciously as he could. He was crying in his heart, "Old master, why did you wait until now to make me swear? I, Sui Yang, have always been meritorious. Today, I finally have the day to stand out." He originally wanted to show his loyalty, but what could he do when Zhang Yan ignored him like he didn't exist? Now, he finally had the feeling of being able to stand out after suffering for so long. Zhang Yan chuckled and pointed to the book in his hand. He said, "Take this source-seeking scripture. It can help you stabilize your soul and restrain your primordial spirit. In the future, when you return to the sect, you won't lose your soul. Su Yang knew his stuff and quickly kowtowed and said respectfully, "Many thanks, old master." The true spirit phantom body couldn't flip through the book. Zhang Yan just spread it out on the table and let him read it himself. Su Yang was also in charge of the inner palace in the Su clan. He had always understood the ways of the world. He knew that the more useful he was, the more he would be valued by Zhang Yan. Otherwise, he could be abandoned at any time. Thus, he didn't dare to have any half-hearted thoughts. After seriously reading for a while, he couldn't help but be happy. He hesitated for a moment, then raised his head and carefully said, "Old master, there are many Yin demons around here. Can I move them?" Zhang Yan said, "They are ownerless items. You can take them as you please. Cultivate on your own, don't ask me." Su Yang nodded and suddenly jumped up. He opened his mouth and swallowed a Yin demon in the air. The demon sect paid particular attention to plundering and killing. The Yin demons were incorporeal and formless. They were born from the essence of the netherworld. To normal cultivators, they were avoided like the plague. But to Su Yang, they were great nourishment. After eating dozens of Yin demons, his body gradually filled up and solidified. He was no longer in that ethereal state from before. Without the shackles of his mortal body, he was like a fish in water when cultivating the origin-seeking scripture. The demon sect also had a method to sever the corporeal body to cultivate the soul. However, this method was too risky. Moreover, they were not like Su Yang, who was a cultivator who had already opened his meridians. His primordial spirit was not something that mortals could compare with. More importantly, cultivating in a devil's room was a treatment only a disciple of a devil sect could enjoy. Although this was only a small devil's room and couldn't compare to a real spiritual eye, it was comparable to a normal cave. There was no difference between the devil head and the devil head. After swallowing dozens of Yin demons, Su Yang felt like he was full again. He apologized to Zhang Yan and withdrew back into the jade to condense. It seemed that he wouldn't come out for a while. Zhang Yan didn't care about him. He wiped away the blood essence from the treasures one by one, then used his own blood essence to refine them. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. On this day, when Zhang Yan finished refining the cloud-filling bowl, he felt a rumble beneath him. Opening his eyes, he could feel the speed of the flying boat getting faster and faster. Silently checking the time, it was now the hour of the morning, and there were still 4 hours until noon, when the eye of the sea would open. At that time, the demonic energy would spew out, and the seawater in his orifices would flow out. Following the current, he would be able to reach the eye of the sea below the Shoming Palace, and escape with his life. However, the Blood Soul sect disciples would definitely set up many obstacles in front of them to prevent them from returning. Chapter 92. The 15th day of the 11th month, C. The Dragon Fang flying ship flew to the exit of the Devil Nose, its 30-meter-long hull suspended in the air as it looked down with a murderous aura. The dragon head at the bow of the ship looked more ferocious than usual. "They're here." Li Weimin, who had been waiting for a long time, suddenly stood up. He looked around and steadied his mind. He was surrounded by clumps of thick gray smoke, and on each clump of smoke, there was a tall flag, with a total of 36 numbers. This was not a formation, but a magic treasure that the elders of the sect had refined for him, the Corpse Smoke Chi banner. The banner had a main and secondary banner. He held the main banner, and the other 36 were the secondary banners. In truth, this magic treasure was only half refined, and could not be used to attack enemies. However, it was more than enough to defend. Li Weimin believed that today was not the day to decide victory or defeat with the cultivators of Qinsang School. There was no need to fight to the death, and it was enough to buy time. As long as his eldest brother Li Wide returned, wouldn't it be easy to take care of these people? However, there's no harm in taking a look at the achievements of these Qinsang School cultivators. Li Weimin looked up and felt that his side's momentum was somewhat weak. He waved his hand and signaled for the two cultivators beside him to go up and test the waters. The two Blood Soul sect cultivators immediately formed a seal, and a faint shadow appeared above each of their heads. Their facial features were like real people, but their lower bodies were ethereal like mist, and vaguely seemed to be supported by a thick bloody aura. This was a blood soul that they had refined using their own spirit to capture devils. Normally, they could not only release it to attack enemies, but they could also feed on the vitality and blood essence of enemies to nourish themselves. The two of them moved forward, and the two blood souls turned into two bloody shadows that pounced towards the Dragon Fang flying ship. Zhang Yan was standing on the third floor of the flying ship. The view here was wide, and he could see the entire scene at the entrance of the Devil Nose. At this moment, turbid air filled the air, and was blocked by gray clouds of smoke, completely obscuring the scene in front of him. It was obvious that this was the doing of Blood Soul Sect's disciple Yu. At this moment, he glanced to the side and saw two Blood Soul beasts rushing over. However, the direction they were heading towards was coincidentally where Fang Zhen was. Looking at the direction the Blood Soul had come from, Zhang Yan sneered. He pointed forward and a ray of blue light flew in that direction. Fang Zhen also noticed the abnormality. He snorted coldly and didn't look at it any longer. He just raised the 5-fire divine weapon circle in his hand and casually waved it in front of him. Two fireballs flew toward the two blood spirits. Chi-chi, the two blood spirits turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. When Li Weimin saw this scene, he was secretly praising the power of the 5 Fire's divine weapon circle, but he suddenly saw a blue light darting into the smoke formation. His vision blurred, and the head of a disciple beside him was chopped off. The sword pill floated in the air and swayed before flying back. Impressive, impressive. Li Weimin couldn't help but sweat. No wonder Big Brother told him to be careful. He had lost a disciple because he had been careless. If they were fighting head-on, without Big Brother here, he really wouldn't have been able to stop them. Zhang Yan put away the sword pill and looked at the thick layer of smoke and the flags in the surroundings. He pondered for a while before walking next to Xie Zongyuan and saying, "Senior Brother Xie, that Mystic Light Realm cultivator doesn't seem to be here. We can go all out and attack." Xie Zongyuan's mind shook and he said, "Oh. Why do you say so?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "If that Mystic Light Realm cultivator was here, there would be no need to put up such a defensive appearance. This was a battle between cultivators, not two armies. If they wanted to defeat them, a cultivator with a high cultivation would be enough. There was no need to put up such a formation. That's reasonable." Xie Zongyuan turned around and cupped his hands at Fang Zhen. He said, "There's something strange about this smoke. Senior Brother Fang, we'll have to rely on your 5-fire divine weapon ring to open a path." Fang Zhen snorted and walked to the front of the boat. He waved his sleeves and said, "Protect me." Without waiting for anyone to respond, he took out the 5-fire divine weapon ring and chanted a spell. The ring began to spin in the air, and purple flames appeared on the edge of the golden ring. More and more flames appeared. At this moment, Fang Zhen revealed a tired expression. When he almost couldn't hold on anymore, he shouted, "Go!" In an instant, balls of flames rained down on the smoke and clouds below like a torrential rain. The long banners on the ground made strange buzzing sounds. They moved without any wind and leaped up to block the front. As soon as they came into contact with the flames, there was a crackling sound. In an instant, 7 or 8 banners were destroyed, turning into wisps of green smoke that drifted into the air. Every time a banner was destroyed, there would be a cloud of smoke on the ground that dissipated. Seeing this scene, Li Weimin, who was hiding in the formation, chuckled. He picked up the main banner in his hand and waved it. The dispersed smoke gathered again, forming a banner once more, and stayed there. He had buried the essence-gathering jade plate under the sand. It could continuously absorb the spiritual qi in the surroundings and supply it to this treasure. As long as the main banner wasn't destroyed and there was someone to use it, he could condense another one at any time even if the secondary banners were destroyed. Everyone on the dragon tooth flying ship was overjoyed when they saw the banners being broken. However, they did not expect the banners to return to normal in just a moment. Moreover, the smoke that seemed to be dispersing was suppressed once again, no longer moving. Everyone frowned. Without dispersing the thick smoke, no one dared to recklessly charge in. After all, who knew what killing moves were hidden inside? Seeing that the opening of the eye of the sea was getting closer and closer, everyone couldn't help but feel anxious. Zhang Yan was still very calm. He watched for a while, a thoughtful look in his eyes. After a while, he turned to Fang Zhen and asked, "Senior brother Fang, according to what you saw just now, how many banners can you destroy in one go?" Fang Zhen was startled. He calculated and said, "There are a total of 36 banners. If I attack with all my strength, it should be no less than 18. Then you can destroy half." Zhang Yan nodded and smiled, "That's enough." Xie Zongyuan heard the hidden meaning in his words and couldn't help but ask, "Senior brother, do you have an idea?" Zhang Yan pointed down and said, "Senior brother Xie, look, just now when senior brother Fang made a small crack in the mist, I vaguely saw a person standing on the stone platform with a banner in his hand. He seemed to be in charge of it. Only after he waved the banner did the mist gather. He must be the key person in this formation. We need to find a way to kill him." Fang Zhen's face revealed a trace of ridicule. "Senior brother Zhang, this person is in the depths of the thick clouds. If we want to go in and kill him, we must break the thick clouds. If we can break it, why are we still standing here?" Lu Tao knew that Zhang Yan wouldn't speak without thinking, so he said, "Senior brother Zhang, do you have an idea?" Zhang Yan smiled and nodded, "Yes, I do. I see that there is an opportunity in this cloud. If senior brother Fang's divine weapon circle can be broken one more time, I can take advantage of the gap before it closes and borrow Jian Shao to go in and kill this person." Fang Zhen paused and then said with a frown, "Junior brother Zhang, you have to think it through. If you go in and fail, we won't be able to save you." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "Of course I have. Right now, that mystic light realm cultivator isn't here. If I don't try it, I won't even have a chance like this when he comes back." Fang Zhen laughed and said, "Good. Since junior brother Zhang is so bold, then I, Fang Zhen, won't hide anything. Today, I will show you the true power of my 5-fire divine weapon ring." At this moment, muffled rumbling sounds came from all directions. It was as if there was an army of 10,000 horses galloping above their heads, and the ground below was also rumbling like thunder. It was as if the entire demonic cave was shaking. Everyone turned their heads to look, only to see a surging river below suddenly coming to life. Raising its head, it was like an enraged dragon soaring towards the sky, gushing towards the entrance of the devil's cave. Even the thick clouds couldn't conceal this astonishing scene. Xie Zongyuan took a few steps forward and shouted, "The Sea Eyes Gate is open." Everyone on the dragon tooth flying boat was stirred. Lu Tao suddenly said to Xie Zongyuan, "Senior brother Xie, why don't you get on the Agarwood boat first? Senior brother Zhang must have confidence in what he did. Once the formation is broken, don't hesitate and rush into the water column with all your strength." Xie Zongyuan hesitated for a moment before nodding his head heavily, "Okay." He handed the sea tablet to Lu Tao and said, "Senior brother Lu, I'll give this treasure to you." Lu Tao didn't stand on ceremony and took it. "Senior brother, remember, the opportunity is fleeting. Don't hesitate." Xie Zongyuan solemnly cupped his hands at everyone, then took out a talisman and released the Agarwood ship. He called Feng Ming to enter with him, and under the complicated gazes of everyone else, they closed the ship's door. Once the clouds broke, they would rush out of the demonic cave along the water. Zhang Yan looked at Fang Zhen and said, "Senior brother Fang, get ready to move." Fang Zhen snorted lightly and took a step forward. He held the 5-fire divine weapon ring in his hand and chanted a spell. In a flash, he threw the ring into the sky again. The ring grew larger and larger, until it was 10 feet wide. The purple flames that originally encircled the ring gradually turned golden red. Even the ring was filled with swaying flames. The ring bloomed in the sky like the sun, emitting a low muffled sound. It seemed to be brewing something, and its momentum was terrifying. This power made Li Weimin, who was watching from below, nervous. He simply sat on the stone platform and activated the banners with all his strength, preparing to deal with this attack. Fang Zhen's head was already dripping with sweat, but he still gritted his teeth and persevered. In the end, he roared, "Open!" Boom! The surging flames formed a sea of fire that gushed out from the divine weapon ring. Li Weimin also shouted, waving the main banner with all his strength. The 36 banners shook in unison and leaped up to meet the attack. However, like moths flying into a flame, the banners turned into smoke the moment they came into contact with the flames. The cloud of smoke that had gathered in one place also became thinner, showing signs of dissipating. Li Weimin waved the banners with all his might. Every time the flames broke a banner, he would condense it again. For a time, he was able to resist the attack. The originally unstable cloud of smoke also gradually closed up. However, at this moment, Zhang Yan still didn't move. After the cloud of smoke thinned a little, he stared at Li Weimin's figure. The sword pill floating next to him buzzed, as if it could fly out of his hand at any moment. Almost at the instant the cloud of smoke closed up, his eyes flashed, and his body and sword merged into one as he shot out like a rainbow. The instant he moved, a blood-colored light also flashed across the sky and quickly flew over. Lu Tao looked over and exclaimed, "Not good, that Xian Light Realm cultivator is back." Li Weimin was waving the banners, and just as the smoke formation was about to close up, he heard someone say, "Senior Brother Li is back." He turned around and saw that it was indeed the case. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Big Brother is back. At this moment, no one was paying attention to a long rainbow that seemed to have descended from the heavens. In an instant, it tore through the void and pierced through the gaps in the clouds, heading straight for them. Li Weimin suddenly sensed something, but the instant he turned his head, a bright light flashed in front of him. Chapter 93. After killing Li Weimin with a slash, Zhang Yan's figure did not stop. A sword light pierced through the cloud of smoke. He didn't pay attention to the flag that had fallen to the ground. There were more than 10 Blood Soul sect disciples around him, and there was even a mystic light realm cultivator rushing over. If he was caught up, he really wouldn't be able to leave. As for whether or not he could use this chance to escape, that would depend on Xie Zongyuan himself. At this moment, the people on the dragon-tooth flying ship couldn't see the situation in the smoke. Lu Tao said in a deep tone, "I wonder if Senior Marshal Brother Zhang succeeded." Fang Zhen snickered coldly and said, "Don't even think about it. How could that person be killed so easily? I'm afraid Zhang Yan has already died in the formation." Right at this moment, a cultivator behind him pointed forward and shouted, "Look, the smoke and clouds are dispersing." Everyone was startled and looked in that direction at the same time. Now that the main banner had lost its owner, the remaining banners were no longer moving. Naturally, they couldn't stop the smoke and started to dissipate. Lu Tao's expression changed as he turned and shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother Xia, let's go." Senior Marshal Brother Zhang succeeded. Xie Zongyuan had been prepared when Zhang Yan charged into the smoke. Seeing this situation, he didn't hesitate at all. He waved his token and the Agarwood boat flew into the air. A streak of light shot through the air toward the pillar of water. Fang Zhen originally wanted to follow, but after taking a step forward, he hesitated and didn't move in the end. He thought in his heart, how can the disciples of the Blood Soul sect not have a backup plan? Xie Zongyuan is unwise and is seeking his own death. I don't need to die with him. However, what happened next was out of his expectations. Li Weimin's sudden death caused all the Blood Soul sect disciples present to be at a loss for a moment. Their reactions were a beat too slow, so no one came up to stop Xie Zongyuan. The Agarwood boat actually smoothly charged into the pillar of water, and then floated up with the current, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Fang Zhen was dazed and looked in front of him in disbelief. Xie Zongyuan had successfully escaped just like that. He couldn't help but feel regret. If he had grasped the timing just now, he might have been able to charge out, but now, he looked at the streak of blood-colored light flying over and then at the chaotic blood soul sect disciples below. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Follow me and kill our way out." Leaping forward, he leaped out of the Dragon Fang flying ship and flew straight towards the direction of the water pillar. The three cultivators behind him had always followed his lead. Now that they heard his call, they followed without hesitation. According to their original plan, they had already sent Xia and Feng away, so they should retreat as soon as possible to avoid fighting head-on with the disciples of the Blood Soul sect who had Mystic Light Realm cultivators. Then, they should wait patiently for the Yingcang sect to send more powerful cultivators to help them. However, regardless of whether it was Lu Tao or Cheng'an, when they saw that they were only a few steps away from escaping from the Devil's Den, and the hope of escaping was right before their eyes. Moreover, Xie Zongyuan and Feng Ming had left so easily, their hearts couldn't endure this feeling. Their original thoughts immediately wavered. After all, it was too dangerous inside the demon's cave. If they took a step forward, they might be able to escape. Seeing Fang Zhen lead the way, the two of them made up their minds and charged forward as well. Fang Zhen also knew that this was a matter of life and death. If that Mystic Light Realm cultivator caught up in time, he wouldn't be able to escape. Therefore, he used the 5 fire divine weapons to open a path and threw out balls of fire. He didn't hold back at all. Not only did he destroy the mist in front of him, even the Blood Soul sect disciples had no choice but to dodge. They were all driven to the side, and he actually managed to charge through. When he saw that the pillar of water was right in front of him, he couldn't help but feel overjoyed. He couldn't help but neglect everything else for a moment. However, he didn't expect that at this moment, a line of blood would tear through the air and arrive in front of him in almost the blink of an eye. By the time he realized it, it was already too late to react. Puchi! He screamed miserably, and the arm that held the 5 fire divine weapon ring was ripped off. The streak of blood-colored light seemed to be alive as it wrapped around the arm and ate up all the flesh and bones. Only the divine weapons fell down. Seeing this, fear appeared on the faces of the 3 cultivators behind him. They didn't care about Fang Zhen's life anymore. They all rushed past him and wanted to be the first to escape. With a flash of blood-colored light, a person appeared in front of the 3 of them. One of the cultivators couldn't dodge in time and collided with it. With a bang, his entire body exploded into flesh and blood. With another flash of blood-colored light, everything disappeared in an instant. The 2 cultivators couldn't help but be shocked. They quickly stopped and looked up to see a cultivator in a red robe standing in front of them. He was looking at them coldly, and his expression was terrifyingly dark. The 2 of them felt a strong sense of danger and yelled as they took out their magic treasures. A flying sword and a white stone flew through the air toward this cultivator. A look of disdain flashed across Li Wide's eyes. He folded his arms and floated there motionlessly. A blood-red mysterious light emerged from his body and swept across horizontally. Unexpectedly, the 2 of them, along with their magic treasures, were swept into it. With a squeeze and a squeeze, the flesh and blood of the 2 of them were completely devoured, leaving not a single trace. This was the power of a Xian light cultivator. When facing a clear Qi cultivator, if you didn't have a good magic treasure to protect you, just a sweep of the light would be enough to kill you. Fang Zhen felt his heart shatter. Although he could summon back the divine weapon ring he had lost, the other party would definitely not give him the chance to do so. He could be considered to have made a decision. He immediately gave up on this unrealistic idea and turned to flee. A sharp light flashed through Li Wide's eyes. He raised his hand and pointed forward. A streak of blood-colored light appeared on his fingertip and hit Fang Zhen's back. Fang Zhen couldn't help but jump forward. His body shook a bit, but he was actually unharmed and continued to escape. A strange look appeared in Li Wide's eyes. He coldly snorted and said, "Do you think a piece of armor can protect you?" His body didn't move, but two huge hands that were 100 feet tall and filled with blood qi appeared above his head. They stretched forward, and in the blink of an eye, they had crossed a distance of more than 20 feet, grabbing Fang Zhen like a doll. The two bloody hands grabbed Fang Zhen's head and feet respectively. They lifted Fang Zhen up and tore him apart. Fang Zhen let out a pitiful scream as he was torn in two and a wisp of his origin spirit floated out. The blood-red light swept upwards and Li Wide was just about to absorb Fang Zhen's origin spirit when he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his eyes. He saw a ball of light emerge from Fang Zhen's origin spirit and protect his origin spirit. Fang Zhen's origin spirit broke through the blood-red hand with a single strike. Then, Fang Zhen dove into a nearby pillar of water and disappeared without a trace. The divine weapon ring that had fallen to the ground also leaped into the air and flew up, following them. Li Wide frowned. He knew that this person must have received the protection of a powerful cultivator, so his origin spirit wouldn't be killed. But since he had already escaped, he didn't think about it anymore. His gaze turned and landed on Lu Tao and Qing, and Lu Tao was using the Dark Sea Steel to press the Blood Soul sect disciples to the ground when he suddenly felt his body tighten, as if something extremely dangerous was staring at him. He had just seen Fang Zhen's fate and knew that he couldn't escape. He sighed inwardly and didn't look at Li Wide, who was rushing over. Instead, he turned his head to look at the dragon-tooth flying ship. Seeing a blue light flying there, he immediately relaxed. A thick stench of blood surged up, and a crimson light swept downwards, swallowing him up. Another crimson light swept over, wrapping Chang'an in as well. Li Wide's figure did not stop, and he directly pounced towards the Dragon Fang flying ship. In less than a dozen breaths' time, other than Xie Zongyuan and Feng Ming who had escaped, the other Qinsang school disciples who had tried to rush out of the demon cave were all killed by him. With a flash of blue light, Zhang Yan stood still on the edge of the dragon-tooth flying ship. His gaze was extremely calm. He had seen all of this clearly. He sighed softly and turned to the nervous Madame Chen. "Madame Chen, let's go." Seeing Zhang Yan's calm expression, Madame Chen's heart also calmed down. Because her cultivation was low, she had always been in charge of piloting the flying ship and didn't go up to fight. Because she hadn't found her husband, she didn't think of rushing out. So she had stayed here all this time and was lucky to survive. Now that she heard Zhang Yan's instructions, she waved the talisman in her hand and the dragon-tooth flying ship rumbled and flew quickly. Li Wide was rushing over here. Seeing that the flying ship was getting faster and faster, a fierce light shone in his eyes. He waved his sleeve forward and 2 lines of blood flew out. The speed of these 2 lines of blood was extremely fast. Zhang Yan only had time to dodge, but Madame Chen didn't have time to dodge. With a poochie sound, the blood light pierced through her chest. She cried out miserably as she fell to the ground. The talisman in her hand also fell to the ground. The blood light pounced on her body and devoured all of her flesh and blood. And the line of blood that flew towards Zhang Yan actually turned in the air and pounced towards him again. At such a close distance, he didn't have time to do anything else. He threw an item into the air and saw a shield with 2 wings in front of him. With a crack, the shield broke. And when the line of blood collided with it, it also turned into a faint stream of blood qi and dissipated. Zhang Yan took a few steps forward and picked up the talisman that Madame Chen had thrown. He activated it and the dragon-tooth flying ship that had slowed down after losing someone piloting it sped up again. He felt that the danger wasn't over yet, so he didn't hesitate to take out the pure qi shield and cast it into the air. Immediately, a beam of light splashed down and covered him. As expected, that Madame Chen's line of blood that was originally hibernating suddenly leaped up and scurried upwards. However, it collided head-on with the light pillar. This light was extremely firm. No matter how the line of blood collided, Zhang Yan, who was standing in it, didn't move. He raised his head and looked into the distance. Seeing that Li Wide was still in hot pursuit, he sneered and repeatedly activated the talisman in his hand. The flying ship's speed became faster and faster. Li Wide watched as Zhang Yan flew further and further away. Finally, he had no choice but to stop. He looked at the dragon-tooth flying ship that was gradually turning into a small dot of light and said coldly, "Wayman, don't worry. Even if I have to chase to the ends of the world, I will definitely kill this person and avenge you." Chapter 94. Inside the dragon-tooth flying ship, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged in a pavilion on the second floor. He lowered his eyes and looked into his chest, wholeheartedly guarding the sum of the two mysterious lights of the alchemy fire. The originally two balls of light were now shining brighter and brighter, illuminating his internal organs, as if they were only a line away from bursting out. At this time, Su Yang, who was standing guard outside, suddenly shouted, "Master, he's here again. He's here again." Zhang Yan slowly retracted his aura. He was not surprised at all. 16 days had passed. Almost every time he stopped cultivating for a while, Li Wide would find where he was staying and chase after him again. He had been chasing and pausing for the past few days. The other seemed to have reached the point where he wouldn't stop until he killed him. However, since Li Wide couldn't catch up to him, he didn't need to worry too much. The only troublesome thing was that Li Wide's actions delayed his cultivation. Although the golden and red lights in his chest were starting to take shape, he only needed half a month at most to reach the mystic light realm. Because of Li Wide's delay, the time was delayed by more than double. However, what puzzled him was that for some reason, it was already past the first day of the 12th month, and the gate of the Ci should have reopened. Logically speaking, the Azure Sea sect should have sent cultivators with profound cultivation bases down to rescue them, or at the very least, they should have sent someone down to investigate. However, not a single person had come down yet. Even Zhang Yan couldn't figure out why this was happening. He didn't want to think about it. Even if he was being chased, with his cultivation speed, he would be able to reach the mystic light realm in 7 days at most. At most, he would come back and fight with Li Wide. He used the talisman and the flying ship started to fly. But this time, it seemed that the speed of the flying boat was a little slower. Li Wide, who was still far away, suddenly had a burst of bloody light on his body. His speed suddenly accelerated, and he closed the distance between them. He flicked his sleeves, and 2 bloody lines shot out from his sleeves, pouncing on him. As soon as they got close to the dragon-tooth flying ship, they seemed to be flies that had smelled something fishy, automatically pouncing towards Zhang Yan, who was alive and well. Seeing that the flesh-devouring blood threads were rushing towards him, Zhang Yan's mouth twitched. He waved his hand and 2 flying swords soared into the sky to meet them. Chi-chi, after the 2 flying swords collided with the blood threads, the spirit attached to them was instantly melted away, turning into a pile of ordinary iron that fell to the ground. The blood threads also faded away. Zhang Yan smiled. After fighting with Li Wide for the past few days, he had learned the characteristics of this bloodline. This thing would automatically devour things with spirit energy. However, the difference was that if it was flesh and blood, then it would be like they had been nourished and would actively search for food again. If it was a magic treasure, after the spirit energy on the magic treasure was removed, the blood thread itself would be completely consumed and no longer exist. Zhang Yan didn't have anything else, but he had a lot of flying swords and magic treasures. Apart from the escaping sound flying sword and the purple gold copper dagger axe that he had gotten from Wang Pan, he also had a dozen or so flying swords that he had gotten from Scarlet Cloud Island. He took them all out to block the blood threads. After all, with the star sword orb, he didn't need these things anymore. When Li Wide saw 2 more bloodlines disappear without a trace, his heart ached endlessly. His blood threads were the blood worms that were condensed from the blood yuan technique. Not only could they pollute magic treasures and deplete their spirit energy, but they could also devour flesh and blood to nourish themselves. If he cultivated it to a high level, when fighting with an enemy, the overwhelming blood worms would be able to overwhelm him no matter how powerful his supernatural power was. However, so far, he had only cultivated 32 blood worms. If he used one, he would have to sit in the blood pool for 3 months to replenish it. At first, his blood worms destroyed a few of Zhang Yan's flying swords, and he thought that his opponent had exhausted all his tricks. Who knew that Zhang Yan was so extravagant that he used all the flying swords that could be used as low-grade spirit weapons to block his attacks? Moreover, there was an endless stream of flying swords that were thrown out like scrap metal, causing him to suffer heavy losses. The muscles on Li Wide's face twitched. In addition to the 2 that he had just lost, he had lost a total of 15 blood worms. At this moment, he suddenly felt weak and cursed in his heart. He had no choice but to stop and watch the dragon-tooth flying ship fly away again. Zhang Yan smiled lightly, as if he had already expected this. After exchanging a few blows, he also knew that Li Wide had a technique that could suddenly increase his speed for a short period of time. However, this technique seemed to consume a lot of yuan qi, and it would take at least 3 days before it would reappear in front of him again. Presumably, this period of time was used to recover. Therefore, by hiding this time, he would be able to spend another 3 days in peace. Sitting back in the cabin, he called out, "Where's Su Yi-ong?" "Yes, master, I'm here." Su Yi-ong hurriedly floated over. Now that his body was gradually stabilized, other than his lower body still floating in the air, revealing his spirit body, his appearance was no different from an ordinary person. However, Zhang Yan knew that without a corporeal body, without the nourishment of essence yang, he would not be able to continue cultivating like a normal demonic cultivator. As for how far he could go, it would depend on his own luck. "Listen to me, this time I'm trying to break through to the next realm, and there can't be any mistakes. You need to be more vigilant, understand?" "Yes, master, this lowly one won't dare to be careless." Zhang Yan nodded and waved his hand to signal him to leave. He then controlled the flying ship to continue flying, and in the end, he found a slightly higher slope to stop. He looked around, and seeing that the view here was wide, even if there was danger, he would be able to discover it, so he nodded and went back to cultivating. After that, for the next 5 days, perhaps because Li Wide was planning something else, he actually didn't come to find him, so he could clear his mind and cultivate. However, this time, although he avoided a strong enemy, he encountered a problem with his cultivation. As he repeatedly condensed the profound light in his chest, it no longer increased, but he still couldn't take that final crucial step. It was like a pool full of water, but there was a thick layer of seal over the top, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't rush out. He had to stop and think about what the problem was. At that moment, a shout came from outside again, "Master, that person is coming again." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he nodded. Calculating the time, it was about time. If the other party still didn't come, he might have given up on chasing him. He picked up the talisman, and the dragon-tooth flying ship floated up from the slope, once again drifting into the distance. However, this time, he was surprised, and he discovered something different from before. Li Wide didn't know what kind of help he had received, but his speed was slightly faster than before. However, he maintained a speed that was neither too close nor too close, and he didn't chase too closely, but he didn't leave either. What was he playing at this time? "Master, there's someone up ahead." Su Kuang shouted in alarm. Zhang Yan turned his head, and saw 3 black-robed cultivators flying towards him from 3 different directions. They had released their blood souls from afar, as if they wanted to surround and stop him. He couldn't help but come to a realization. So that's how it is. The 2 of them had chased each other for so many days, and Li Wide roughly knew that Zhang Yan didn't dare to go deep into the demon's territory, and only circled around a certain area. As a result, he thought that he had seen through Zhang Yan's movement patterns, and arranged for a few Blood Soul sect cultivators to block the way ahead. As long as they stalled him for a while, they would catch up and kill him. In all fairness, Li Wide's method could be considered targeted, but he had underestimated the threat an ordinary cultivator posed to Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan smiled coldly, and took out the pure qi shield. With a hand seal, he placed it above his head, and a barrier of light fell down, protecting his entire body. Not only did he not dodge, but he even steered the flying boat towards the Blood Soul sect cultivators. A few Blood Souls rushed down, pouncing on the light around his body. Unexpectedly, like a wave hitting a reef, they were all bounced back. The leading cultivator saw the dragon tooth flying boat rushing towards him. The boat was more than 300 feet long, and with its speed, what would happen if he was hit by it? He couldn't help but turn pale with fright, and hurriedly dodged to the side. However, he didn't expect that Zhang Yan, who was standing at the bow of the boat, would have a talisman in his mouth, and a beast-faced broadsword had appeared in his hands at some point. At this moment, seeing him dodge, Zhang Yan raised the broadsword, and with a crack, it cut him in two. The flying boat rushed past, smashing through his flesh and blood, and didn't stop for even a moment, rushing towards the next Blood Soul sect disciple. This Blood Soul sect disciple couldn't help but change his expression, and turn to flee for his life, but how could he be faster than the dragon tooth flying boat? Very quickly, Zhang Yan caught up. With a loud roar, he spat out the talisman, and with another slash, this cultivator was chopped off along with his shoulder and half of his head. He grabbed the talisman in his hand again, and with a wave of his hand, he pretended to attack the third cultivator. When the last Blood Soul sect disciple saw Zhang Yan kill two of his fellow sect members like slaughtering chickens, he was instantly scared out of his wits, and repeatedly cried out, "Senior brother, save me, senior brother, save me." Li Wide's expression also changed greatly. Gritting his teeth, his figure leaped up, and he rushed over at an extremely fast speed. Zhang Yan looked back, and instead of being shocked, he was happy, and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He said, "Finally can't hold it in anymore." He stood with one hand holding the saber, and laughed loudly towards the sky. Activating the talisman, the dragon tooth flying boat became faster and faster, and soon disappeared without a trace. Li Wide chased for a long time, and in the end, he had no choice but to give up. Hearing Zhang Yan's laughter that seemed to still echo in his ears, he was so angry that his face turned ashen, and he roared madly, "Junior, I will definitely kill you." Zhang Yan had already gone far enough, and naturally couldn't hear his roar. Even if he heard it, he would just dismiss it with a laugh. "With the talisman flying boat in hand, what can you do to me? When I cultivate profound light, it won't be too late to go back and find this person." But thinking up to here, he frowned again. He had clearly accumulated enough profound light, but why couldn't he charge through this last obstacle? He thought hard about what he had overlooked, and carefully searched for the reason. After an unknown amount of time, finally, his eyelids twitched, and he thought of a very possible reason. Could it be because of the divine will? When this thought came up, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. The Tai Golden Book took the two elements of metal and fire, and these two elements had a sense of vigor, which was the way to forge ahead. And these few days, he had been cultivating in the dragon tooth flying boat, and he had been dodging left and right all the way. It seemed dangerous, but in fact, he was safe and sound. With a way out in his heart, he naturally couldn't have the thought of fighting to his death. In this way, the divine will didn't match, and he naturally couldn't reach the realm of being one with profound light. He couldn't stir up a storm, and as a result, this last step couldn't be completed. Understood. The Tao of my generation is to face difficulties, and then re-establish after breaking. Now that he had reached this step, he could only fight to the death. A resolute look shot out from Zhang Yan's eyes, and he recalled the map in his mind. Then, he urged the flying boat to fly towards the southeast direction. Not long after, he found a cave with only an entrance and no exit, and got off the dragon-tooth flying boat, and directly lived in it. He was cutting off his own path of retreat, cutting off all means of retreat. Chapter 95. Sitting in the cave, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, concentrating on meditating. He wasn't in a hurry to activate the mysterious light in his chest, but instead, he immersed his mind in it, slowly searching for the spiritual opportunity within. This large expanse of mysterious light was like a pool of stagnant water, as if it had formed into blocks, unwilling to have any ripples. However, Zhang Yan wasn't impatient. He knew that to stir this mysterious light bit by bit, to find the spiritual opportunity within, these first few steps were the most difficult. It wasn't that he wasn't moving, but that the time wasn't right. Just like adding fuel to boiling water, or melting iron into liquid, he needed enough patience. Time passed day by day, he had already been motionless like a statue for 4 days. Su Yang, who was on the lookout at the entrance of the cave, suddenly became inexplicably nervous. After cultivating the source-seeking scripture and devouring no less than 100 demons, he was now extremely sensitive to even the slightest change in chi activity. Previously, he had already sent out warnings in advance. Even though there weren't any changes happening now, he could feel that trouble was coming, and this sense of danger was getting closer and closer, forcing him to almost jump up. He looked anxiously at Zhang Yan, who had his eyes closed, and said softly, "Master, he's coming." Zhang Yan didn't respond. Su Yang called out softly a few more times, but Zhang Yan still didn't move. After a while, Su Yang's voice became more and more urgent, "Master, Master, he's coming, he's coming." Zhang Yan heard his words, but he was not moved at all. At this moment, he had already entered a strange state. He felt that his spirit and soul were immersed in the mysterious light, and the two of them were almost fused into one, and there was no distinction between them. It was as if he only needed a light push to get the result he wanted. He also felt that the dangerous aura was getting closer and closer to him, but he was as calm as ever, completely ignoring it. At this moment, the mysterious light that hadn't moved for a long time suddenly moved. Like boiling water, it first jumped a little, then began to churn and spin, and its speed became faster and faster, until it actually surged crazily in the end. He knew that he had already reached the most crucial moment, whether he could rush over or not depended on this. "Master, he's coming, he's coming. He's up there." There was a trace of panic in Su Yang's voice. He didn't need to look to know that Li Wide was looking down from above, but he didn't know why Li Wide hadn't charged in yet. Zhang Yan didn't say a word or move. His mind was surging along with the profound light in his chest, like a tidal wave crashing against a dam. After a few attempts, the barrier seemed to loosen a little. He didn't push it deliberately, but let the waves rise on their own, one after another, surging upwards. In the end, his mind suddenly floated up along with a force, and he only heard a boom sound, as if something had been opened. His body couldn't help but shake violently. 2 rays of light, one red and one gold, leaped out from the top of his head and rose into the air. The red light was like lava, and the gold light was like the white of the sun. The 2 rays of mysterious light intertwined with each other and twisted into one. For a moment, sparks flew everywhere. It was like iron being heated in an oven or sand being sharpened into a knife, and a scorching and sharp chi was forced out. The profound clarity illuminating heart was clear, and the divine light was clear. The moment this ball of light appeared, it was like a newborn baby stretching out its arms and legs. It spread out in all directions and spun like it was dancing. For a moment, light blossomed, and the gold and red light broke free. Everywhere it passed, the rocks fell down like rotten powder. Zhang Yan's eyes opened wide while 2 bright lights flickered like the stars in the night sky, causing the entire cavern to glow brightly and illuminate everything down to the slightest detail. He instantly knew that he'd stepped into the first level of the Darklight realm, the elementary illumination realm. He couldn't help but laugh and chant, the metal wind dances together, the mysterious light surges into the sky and sweeps the blood clouds. After chanting, the mysterious light wrapped around his body, and the entire cave shook as a golden red light shot into the sky. Li Wide was originally very excited when he found Zhang Yan, and he was prepared to kill his way in. However, he had fought with Zhang Yan a few times before, and he had a deep impression of him. He couldn't understand why Zhang Yan would suddenly dig his own grave and die. This didn't make sense, so he suspected that Zhang Yan was playing tricks. Therefore, he didn't immediately charge in. He carefully circled around the surroundings twice, and after confirming that there were no tricks up his sleeves, he relaxed and prepared to kill his way in. But right at this moment, a blazing and sharp ray of light soared towards him. Before it even got close, his Xian Qi trembled and his aura became chaotic. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright as he desperately dodged to the side. A blood-red hand emerged from the top of his head and blocked in front of him. However, this mysterious light was unfathomable, and with a "chi-la" sound, it swept away half of his mysterious light hand. Li Wide felt a sharp pain in his heart, and a trace of blood leaked out of the corner of his mouth. He retreated in the air, and his expression changed greatly. When he looked closely, he found that the person standing in front of him was the junior he had been chasing. But at this moment, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed like lightning. Above his head, there were two clouds that were about 200 feet in size. They were like fire and light, fierce in shape and resounding in sound. Just by looking at it from a close distance, there was a boiling feeling that made people unconsciously stop breathing. Li Wide's expression was filled with shock, and he unconsciously said, "Xian, mysterious light?" He was just a clear qi cultivator, so how did he become a mystic light realm cultivator that was the same as him in the blink of an eye? At this moment, Zhang Yan was indescribably happy. He wanted to test out the power of this mysterious light, and this blood soul sect cultivator was the perfect person to test it out on. This person had chased him for many days, so he could use this chance to vent his frustrations. Therefore, he did not use his magical weapon or sword pellet. With a thought, the vast mysterious light above his head spread forward, and like a waterfall hanging down, it surged towards the void where Li Wide was standing. Li Wide's skin was torn apart by the sharp fire, and his eyes felt like they were being stabbed by needles. He couldn't help but be shocked, and he quickly covered his eyes with his hands. He couldn't help but retreat, and a large blood hand appeared above his head, trying to block it. However, not only was it unable to move, the blood hand was ground by the golden fire, and a large part of it disappeared. The mysterious light that was connected to his heart was ground away, and a heart-wrenching pain came. Li Wide screamed and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. He was furious, and he thought, "Impossible, this person has clearly just cultivated the mysterious light, how is he so strong?" If he was at a disadvantage before because Zhang Yan caught him off guard, there was no room for falsehood in this clash of mysterious light. He was clearly at a disadvantage, and he instantly knew that he wasn't a match for Zhang Yan head-on. He leaned back, endured the pain, and took out a gray-white bracelet from his sleeves. He slashed it at Zhang Yan, and shouted, "Junior, how dare you be so arrogant?" This bracelet flew forward, and it instantly grew in size. When it broke through the air, it gave off a muffled sound. It was heavy and heavy, as if it had the power of 10,000 caddies. As it spun, it brought with it a rumble, and it smashed toward Zhang Yan's head. Zhang Yan was about to take out a treasure to block it, but his heart moved, and he thought, rumor has it that once the mysterious light from the Tai Golden Book is formed, it's comparable to a flying sword. I wonder if it's true. His hand that was in the sleeve paused for a moment. As his mind turned, the vast and fierce golden fire mystic light above his head went up and wrapped the bracelet in it. Then, there was a sound that made people's scalp numb. The golden wind raging fire kept grinding the treasure like a capstan. The mystic light was retracted in an instant, and the bracelet was ground away. There wasn't even a speck of it left. Seeing this, Li Wide's eyes widened, and disbelief appeared in his eyes. A chill rose in his heart. I don't know what kind of superior technique this person has cultivated, but the mystic light is so strong. It would be unwise to continue fighting. This mystic light had unleashed the power of both metal and fire to the extreme. Why would there be a need for a technique when fighting an enemy? With just a simple sweep, unless a cultivator at the third level of the mystic light realm had condensed the mystic light into one and turned it into reality, who else could block it? Thinking up to there, he instantly lost his will to fight. How would he dare to stay? He used the mystic light to cover his body, and in a flash, he escaped far away. Zhang Yan had a mocking look on his face. After thinking for a while, he did not release the dragon tooth flying ship. The golden red light above his head shone down and engulfed his whole body. In an instant, the air was filled with fire and the wind was overflowing. A blazing light shot out like a rainbow and chased after Li Wide. With the mysterious light covering his body, the speed of his flight right now was not something that a clear Qi cultivator could compare to. There was not the slightest bit of sluggishness when he moved forward, moving up and down effortlessly. He had a kind of carefree feeling of being able to move freely between heaven and earth. After all, Li Wide's speed wasn't very fast. Even though Zhang Yan didn't use his full strength, he still caught up to Li Wide in an instant. He smiled faintly and sped up a bit, instantly blocking Li Wide's path. The profound light on his body swept downwards without a care in the world, coming right at Li Wide's head. Li Wide cried out in alarm, but all of his abilities were on the profound light. Even though he knew that the other party was relying on the might of the profound light to take him head-on, there was nothing he could do. He could only summon up his courage and also unleash his profound light to block the attack. Zhang Yan's profound light did not strike down at once. Instead, he struck left and right repeatedly, tearing apart Li Wide's blood light, which was still relatively intact, into pieces. Every time it was destroyed, Li Wide's face became paler, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He didn't know that Zhang Yan was using him as a practice target after entering the mystic light realm, so Zhang Yan didn't want to kill him right away. He thought that Zhang Yan was playing with him, and a crazed determination to die appeared in his eyes. He roared and no longer held back. The remaining 17 blood bugs on his body shot out at the same time, and he turned into a bloody shadow that leapt towards Zhang Yan. From afar, it looked like a small cluster of blood clouds charging towards a large ball of golden fire. It was like a moth flying into a flame. Zhang Yan harumphed coldly and said, "Since you've been thinking about it for a long time, then I'll grant your wish." He waved his sleeves, and a large wave of golden fire swept past, sweeping away everything within 100 feet of him. When the mystic light faded, the surroundings became empty. Whether it was the flesh, blood, bones, or even the flying sword and Taoist robe, they had all been ground away. Chapter 96. Zhang Yan sat cross-legged in a cave on the cliff. He spread out his palm, and a trace of mysterious light was attached to the sword pellet. The sword light suddenly expanded, and in an instant, a belt of light as bright as the Milky Way floated in front of him. He exerted his power again, and the stellar essence sand twisted and struggled a few times. Under his gaze, it slowly separated, and then seemed to have the tendency to split into two. But before it completely separated, he felt that the trace of mysterious light attached to it was dissipating at an extremely fast speed. He frowned slightly, and hurriedly withdrew it back into the cave and hid it. Once the mysterious light disappeared, the sword pellet returned to its original state. This was one of the methods of using mysterious light to control the sword pellet recorded in the Jingyuan sword scripture, and it was called light separation method. When this method was used against an enemy, it could cause the sword light to split and injure people. It was extremely powerful. If it could be further refined, it could turn from 2 into 3, 3 into 1,000, and 1,000 into 10,000, until one day it returned to its original state. Every grain of stellar essence sand could be used as a sword pellet. But in order to use it proficiently, it needed to slowly refine the sword pellet with mysterious light, until the sword pellet could transform into a form and be absorbed into the body. Only then could it be used smoothly. But now, it was a little difficult to use it. Zhang Yan gently exhaled. The road was long, and the road of cultivation was long. The beginning of the great Tao was right below him, and he could not slack off. But there was no need to rush it. He kept the sword pellet, slowly got up, and stood with his hands behind his back. At the exit of the demonic cave in front of him, the torrential river water rushed all the way, vast and mighty, and astonishing. Today was the 12th of December. In another 3 days, he could borrow the power of the demonic cave to reverse the river water and return to the great lake of Dragon Abyss. But until now, he still did not understand why there was still no response from Qinsang school until now. Not to mention the other disciples of the same sect, he was a true disciple. Once the sect found out, it was impossible for the sect to ignore it. Although the factions in the sect had internal strife and fought endlessly, it was usually done in the dark and would not be so brazen. This was because this was something that the sect leader would definitely not allow. There was also another thing. Once the news spread, once Zhou Chengju found out, even if he couldn't come, he would ask other experts to come and rescue him. Now that he hadn't made a move yet, it was very likely that no one knew about this, or they found out too late, thus missing the day to enter and exit the CI. Zhang Yan thought about it and felt that the biggest possibility was that Xie Zongyuan and the others encountered something on the way, so they couldn't bring the news back to the sect in time. Thinking about this, he smiled slightly. This place was full of spirit qi and was very suitable for cultivation. Moreover, other than the core formation cultivator, he did not care about the rest of the blood soul sect disciples. If he saw one, he would kill one, if he saw two, he would kill two. Therefore, it was better to stay here for a few more days and improve his strength. Moreover, there was a problem that needed to be solved. He opened his palm, and with a thought, a smear of golden red light appeared and flickered in his palm. He cultivated the Tai Golden Book, and the profound light also walked the path of metal and fire. As long as he released it, people with good eyesight would be able to recognize that it was an extremely profound cultivation method and would be suspicious of its origins. Therefore, he had to think of a way to hide it. Therefore, he planned to condense the water attribute profound light of the Billowing Cloud's secret book in the next few days. Now that he had stepped into the mystic light realm, condensing some water attribute profound light to disguise it would not take much effort. At most, it would take another 7 or 8 days. The remaining time would be used to condense the Yin heavy water. Fortunately, he would have methods to fight the enemy openly in the Battle of the Three Pools. He raised his head and looked at the deep waterway above the demon pit. In a few more days, as long as Xie Zongyuan and the others did not die, the Qinsang school would receive the news no matter what. At that time, he wanted to see who the master and disciple would send to receive him. The more important the disciple they sent, the more it showed his position in their eyes. On the other hand, he would need to think about his future path. Master, Master. Su Yang called out a few times in a low voice from his sleeves. Zhang Yan reached into his sleeves and took out a piece of jade, saying, "What is it?" A green figure floated up, and Su Yang appeared from the jade. Because he was an original spirit, he turned into a small person standing on the jade. Seeing Zhang Yan, he bowed and said, "Master, I want to stay here." Zhang Yan's expression did not change at all, and he only said, "Oh. Why is it like this? Tell me." Su Yang braced himself and said, "Master, I've lost my corporeal body. Even though I've read the source-seeking scripture, I've only obtained its method, and not its technique. I'm afraid that even if I return to the sect, I won't be able to help Master and will instead become a burden. After thinking about it, I can only stay here and walk the path of the devil. Maybe in the future, I can become a great help to Master." The source-seeking scripture was not like the one-breath clear scripture. Not only did it talk about cultivation techniques, it also talked about how to use them. Xianmen emphasized on gathering and nurturing vitality, while the Devil's Sect emphasized on killing and plundering. From the beginning, it talked about how to devour the spirits and take other people's things as one's own. Therefore, Su Yang had actually only cultivated half of the Devil Scripture with the original spirit of a meridian opening cultivator. Even though his progress was godly at first, because he had lost his corporeal body, he had no way to break through when he needed the nourishment of Yang essence. But he still had another path that he could take, and that was the path of the devil. Among the devils, the Yin devil would become the illusory devil in 100 years, the walking devil in another 100 years, and the true devil in another 100 years. After these 300 years, the devil would develop its own intelligence and be like a living person. It was said that there were a few realms above the true devil, and one could even cultivate to the legendary heavenly devil. The power of their divine abilities was not inferior to those almighty cultivators. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment and understood Su Yang's intentions. Master, I've been comprehending the Devil Scripture recently, and I can already separate a true spirit. I can leave it with Master. This spirit is originally one with me, and if there's anything, you can summon me to ask. Su Yang saw that Zhang Yan did not reply for a long time, and he could not help but feel a little nervous. Zhang Yan knew that this was him expressing his loyalty. Su Yang did not have a corporeal body, and if this true spirit was gone, he would definitely lose most of his consciousness. He would be as muddle-headed as a devil, and his advantage over other devils would be reduced by more than half. His fate could be imagined. However, the devil's cave was vast, and he did not dare to go too deep into it. Furthermore, he did not know where the disciples of Blood Soul sect would come from. Leaving Su Yang here was a hidden chess piece that would definitely be useful in the future. Thinking of this, he nodded and said, "All right, I'll allow you. Before I leave, I'll leave you here." Su Yang was instantly moved to tears. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Master, for fulfilling my wish." Zhang Yan said solemnly, "I'm going to meditate and cultivate for the next few days. Stand guard at the side. If there's any movement, report it as soon as possible." Su Yang hurriedly said, "Yes, Master." Zhang Yan turned around and walked towards the depths of the cliff wall cave. This place was about 5 to 6 feet deep, and was completely a space that he had opened up using the mystic light. With the mystic light, it was a lot more convenient. With just a sweep, no matter how hard the rock was, it would also turn into powder. After walking to the deepest part, he took out a praying mat from his sleeve and sat on it. He silently circulated according to the Billowing Cloud's secret manual. Time passed in a flash, and another 4 days passed. Over the past few days, he had made rapid progress. Although the water attribute light had yet to penetrate his chest, there was an undulating blue light that was undulating within his chest. It was enough to conceal it, and in another 7 to 8 days, he would be able to successfully condense it. At this time, he felt the ground rumble and tremble. He could not help but open his eyes and walk out. It turned out that on the 15th day, noon had arrived. The surging river once again rose to the sky, and flowed back towards the exit of the Devil's Cave. Zhang Yan's face was filled with emotion. Although this was not the first time he had seen this scene, every time he saw it, he felt the wonders of creation. Based on this, how many magnificent and wondrous scenes were there in the world? There were 9 continents in the world, and the East Flower continent only occupied one corner. If his cultivation was successful in the future, he would travel the world and comprehend the way, and increase his knowledge. After watching for a long time, just as he was about to turn around and return to the cave, his footsteps halted. He abruptly lifted his head to look upwards, only to see a majestic and solemn green beam of light suddenly descending from above, unexpectedly pushing back the surging river. A young cultivator wearing a green robe with a long belt and wide sleeves and straw shoes slowly floated down from the pillar of light. His large sleeves fluttered, and his eyes were bright and full of spirit. His face was full of a relaxed expression. This person's facial features could not be said to be handsome. At first glance, he also seemed very ordinary. However, upon closer inspection, there was an indescribable majesty and extraordinariness. He stood there majestically, as vast as a mountain, as dense as a forest, making people unconsciously look up to him. As if sensing that someone was looking at him, the young cultivator also looked over. When he saw Zhang Yan, he could not help but smile and said, "Are you junior brother Zhang Yan?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Yes, I am." "How should I address you, senior brother?" The young cultivator smiled and returned the greeting. "I am Qi Yuntian." Qi Yuntian? Even when Zhang Yan heard this person's name, he could not help but be secretly surprised. Originally, Ning Chongxian wanted him to become a disciple of this person, so he had also inquired about this person. Later, he found out that this person was not only a true disciple, but also one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school. Not only that, this person was the first disciple of Meng Zhen, and Meng Zhen was the first disciple of the schoolmaster. If the schoolmaster ascended in the future or retired, it was very likely that this person would take over the position. In other words, Qi Yuntian was very likely to be the future schoolmaster of Qinsang school. It could be imagined what kind of identity this person had. Zhang Yan did not expect that this time, the line of master and disciple would send this person to pick him up. The signal sent was too obvious. It would not be long before the school found out through various channels that he was one of Qi Yuntian's people. His mind quickly calculated. Today, the line of master and disciple sent Qi Yuntian here, first, to reassure him, and second, to show their attitude of supporting him. Most of the top 10 disciples in the school had their own team, but Qi Yuntian did not recruit people from the same school for some reason. He only focused on closed-door cultivation, and very few people in the school saw him. At least before Zhang Yan entered the demon chamber, he did not hear any news of this person coming out of closed-door cultivation. He must have rushed here as soon as he came out. This was obviously to pull him into their camp, but perhaps in their eyes, he was already a part of the line of master and disciple. Didn't this mean that Qi Yuntian now felt that his cultivation was successful and began to form his own team? According to this, if Qi Yuntian was trained as the future schoolmaster, then his coming here had already sent a clear signal. Thinking of this, Zhang Yan's heart shook, and he came to a shocking conclusion. The line of master and disciple was very likely to train him as the future elder of the Grotto Heaven to assist the schoolmaster. Chapter 97. Qi Yuntian waved his sleeves. He didn't need to chant a spell, and the green light that stopped the water suddenly turned into a green branch and entered his sleeves. He then looked at Zhang Yan and said with a kind expression, "According to the two juniors, there are 7 people with junior brother Zhang. Where are they now?" Zhang Yan sighed, and his face was filled with regret as he said, "That day, for the sake of sending senior brother Xia and the others out, I lost a few senior brothers on the spot. After that, I fought a few times with the disciples of the Blood Soul sect. Now, only I, junior brother, am left." Chinese website. Qi Yuntian nodded slightly, but there was no change in his expression. He had been in the Devil's Cave and saw that there was only Zhang Yan here, so this result was already within his expectations. He then asked, "Have the Blood Soul sect disciples appeared in the past few days?" Zhang Yan replied, "At first, I could see them, but I haven't seen them in the past few days. They must be worried about the disciples of our Qinsang school coming, so they didn't dare to stay for long. In reality, after they sent Xiezong Yuan and Feng Ming out of the Devil's Cave, other than Li Wide who wanted to take revenge for Li Weiman and was a mystic light realm cultivator, most of the Blood Soul sect disciples had already left. There were only a few people left who blocked Zhang Yan that day. As for the people he killed, it was related to his own cultivation method, so there was no need to mention them." Qi Yuntian's eyes flashed with a threatening light, and he said coldly, "The Blood Soul sect dares to kill the disciples of our Qinsang school for no reason. When I return, I will report to the sect master and get justice for my juniors." Although his expression was calm, there was a powerful aura hidden in his words that made people unconsciously believe him. Zhang Yan, however, was puzzled. He couldn't help but ask, "Today, senior brother must have come to rescue us." But senior brother Xia and senior brother Feng had already left the sect on the 15th of last month. The sect should have known about this long ago. Could it be that there was some accident on the way that delayed us for so many days? Qi Yintian sighed, shook his head and said, "It's also because of the bad luck of the younger martial brothers. Spiritual Master Peng of the Shouming Palace has reached a critical moment in his cultivation and is about to break through to the next realm. In order to avoid any disturbances, he ordered the island to be locked and no one is allowed to enter or leave. Therefore, even though younger martial brother Xia and younger martial brother Su are out of the demon chamber, they cannot come out until a few days ago when Spiritual Master Peng lifted the ban. Only then did the sect receive the news. So that's how it is." Zhang Yan nodded in realization, and the doubts in his heart were suddenly cleared. He remembered that when they first arrived on the island, Spiritual Master Peng showed signs of breaking through to the next realm. He didn't expect that they would be able to catch up with him. It was really unfortunate. However, this actually didn't affect anything. Fang Zhen and the others could have died by themselves. If they had listened to his previous arrangements and didn't force their way out of the demon chamber, they could have relied on the Dragon Fang flying ship to protect themselves. Qi Yintian looked at Zhang Yan a few times and thought of something. He sighed and said, "When I heard about this matter, I thought that it was too late. But junior brother Ning told me that others might not be able to escape, but junior brother Zhang would definitely be safe and sound. He might even be able to escape by himself without us." I asked him why, but he just smiled and didn't say anything. So I made a bet with him, and now it seems that it is true. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I'm afraid that senior brother Qi was tricked by senior brother Ning. Others don't know about my life or death, but senior brother Ning definitely knows." Qi Yintian asked curiously, "Why?" "In the past, senior brother Ning gave me a wishful spirit prism to protect myself. If I die, the wishful spirit prism will be taken by others and refined by them. At that time, senior brother Ning will definitely feel it, which is why he dared to do this." Hearing this, Qi Yintian couldn't help but laugh loudly. His voice caused the cave walls to rumble. "Good one, junior brother Ning. You made me miscalculate." Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his hands. "I still have to thank senior brother for helping me. It seems that junior brother will be able to return to the sect today." However, Qi Yintian waved his hand and smiled, "There is no rush. I know that we came here to increase our cultivation so that we can fight against the three-lake demonic beasts and make a name for ourselves. However, I see that the Xian seed has already formed, but the Xian light seed hasn't appeared yet, so it is not complete yet. However, to be able to cultivate to this level while being chased by the demonic sect disciples is quite rare. It is not easy to come here, so we can't miss this opportunity. Why don't you continue to cultivate and let me guard you? You can break through the sky hut and enter the mystic light realm." Zhang Yan's heart moved. It seemed that his speculation before was correct. This Qi Yintian was indeed here to rope him in. Originally, the Qi Yintian had come down with the intention of saving him. Under normal circumstances, he would definitely be grateful. However, it seemed that even if no one came, he would be able to escape. Thus, he immediately changed his method of showing kindness. However, this was beneficial to him, so he was happy. He immediately put on a happy expression and cupped his hands. "Thank you, senior brother." Qi Yintian said in a deep voice, "With me here, you can cultivate without worry. Let's see who dares to disturb your cultivation." He obviously wasn't boasting. Before he went into seclusion, Zhang Yan already knew that he was a Yuanian cultivator and could be called a spiritual master. Now that he came out, he didn't know what level his cultivation had reached. Even if the core transformation cultivator of the Blood Soul sect refined the Xian blood pill, once he came here, he probably wouldn't be able to go back. After apologizing to Qi Yuntian, Zhang Yan returned to his cave and sat down, calculating his gains and losses. Qi Yuntian's intention to win him over was very obvious. As his cultivation gradually increased, he would inevitably need various kinds of support from the sect. Not a single cultivation technique was lacking. Joining Qi Yuntian's faction would be more beneficial than detrimental to his cultivation. As for becoming enemies with some people in the sect, he didn't care. On the path of the Tao, cultivation was the foundation. Once his cultivation reached a certain level, everything else wouldn't be a problem. After thinking about this, he eliminated all distracting thoughts and closed his eyes to cultivate. His cultivation this time was very smooth. He was already at the mystic light realm, so all the obstacles didn't come to cause trouble. In less than 6 days, a ball of blue light shone from the top of the cave, illuminating the walls. There was a faint sound of waves moving around. Although it was a success, seeing that Qi Yuntian didn't rush him, Zhang Yan thought that he would only be able to leave on the first day of the next month when the Eye of the Sea opened. With a Yuaniying cultivator protecting him, there probably wouldn't be a situation like this in the future. He thought that this was a rare opportunity, so he might as well use it to refine a few more drops of heavy yin water. After making up his mind, he looked into his qi sea and circulated his spirit qi, concentrating on refining the heavy yin water. He didn't notice the time as he meditated. On this day, after refining the second drop of heavy yin water, he unconsciously let out a long breath. He heard Qi Yuntian say from outside, "Junior brother, today is the 15th of the first month, the Eye of the Sea has opened. Follow me." With that, Zhang Yan felt his body floating outwards. In a flash, he arrived at the entrance of the cave. He saw Qi Yuntian standing on the stone platform with his back facing him. With a flick of his sleeve, the green branch floated out and once again turned into a green pillar of light. In an instant, it stopped the water column that was flowing backwards. He turned back and smiled at Zhang Yan, "Junior brother, close your eyes." Zhang Yan knew that he was going to use a technique, so he closed his eyes. He felt as if Qi Yuntian had placed a hand on his shoulder, and in a blur, his body shook. In just a moment, his feet were back on the ground again. He heard Qi Yuntian say, "Master, you can open your eyes now." Zhang Yan opened his eyes and was surprised to find himself standing under a pavilion. Beside him was a cave with waves surging in it. If it wasn't the flying crane pavilion of the Shoming Palace, where else could it be? In just a breath, he was already out of the Eye of the Sea. He couldn't help but think, "I heard that when one's cultivation has reached Dan transformation, one's body will produce mana and can use supernatural powers. I wonder what technique Qi Yuntian used just now." Qi Yuntian saw him standing still, as if he was thinking about something. Thinking that he was shocked by his technique, Qi Yuntian smiled and said, "Junior martial brother, this technique is known as the free shifting technique of our sect. It is a divine ability that evolved from the 5 elements free shifting technique. In our Yutsang sect, other than the various techniques, there are also the 5 techniques, 3 scriptures, 12 divine abilities, and other superior techniques. Only after you have done some good deeds will you be able to choose a secret manual to cultivate in the Spiritual Mechanism Institute." He patted Zhang Yan's shoulder again and said earnestly, "I know that even though Junior Apprentice Brother's talent is not top-notch, he has a good temperament. If you can keep to your heart and walk down this path, you will have a bright future ahead of you. However, on the path of cultivation, not only do you need good techniques, you also need the support of others who are on the same path as you." It was obvious that Qi Yuntian was trying to rope Zhang Yan in, so Zhang Yan immediately said, "I will remember senior brother's words." Qi Yuntian had a happy expression on his face. He then thought for a while and said, "Now that you have reached the mystic light realm, if you can get some merit in the Battle of the 3 Lakes, I will be able to help you in the future. However, the disciples under you all have outstanding disciples, and they will be your opponents in the future. Remember, don't fall too far behind. Zhang Yan didn't say anything. He just smiled, his confidence evident in his words and actions. Qi Yuntian nodded and said in a friendly tone, "Don't be in a hurry to return to the cave, come with me to see someone." Zhang Yan nodded. The two of them walked out of the soaring crane tower together, but the scene in front of them startled Zhang Yan. There were flying boats and carriages on the island, as well as people moving back and forth. As far as the eye could see, there were probably thousands of cultivators gathered here. It was like a bustling market in the mortal world, and many of them looked happy. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "This is?" Qi Yuntian took a few glances and said, "Last month, Spiritual Master Peng achieved great success. From now on, our sect will have another heavenly abode." The 9 spiritual masters in the Qinsang school had become 10, so their strength should have increased greatly. However, there was no joy in Qi Yuntian's tone. He continued, "A few days ago, when I was still here, members of the Peng family came to congratulate me, but Spiritual Master didn't reject them. Looks like they are indeed from the same family and haven't forgotten about the ties between them." Zhang Yan could tell that although his tone was calm, there was a hint of displeasure in it. He thought for a while and understood the reason. Spiritual Master Peng was originally a member of the Peng family, but because he had a sister with his family, he was expelled from the family. It was said that he was later taken care of by the head of the sect, so he was able to cultivate in the guarding palace. But this time, after she broke through the barrier and became a heavenly abode, the Peng family sent people to congratulate her, but she didn't reject them. The deeper meaning behind it was worth pondering. Qi Yuntian, as the direct descendant of the head of the sect, was naturally quite unhappy. However, Zhang Yan wasn't worried, but happy. The stronger the enemy faction, the more help the master and disciple faction would need, and the more he would have a place to survive. He couldn't help but think, the situation in the sect is getting more and more complicated, but this is also an opportunity for my generation. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.